Chalo, we'll go to the second part of our theory session. In the first part, we have covered the four core theory topics, that is financial policy and corporate strategy, securitization, startup finance and risk management. So these are the four core theory topics, and among the other chapters, other maybe 10 or 11 practical chapters. Out of these as well, the institute will possibly ask you a couple of theory questions, and that will be a good at least 6 to 8 marks, and the other around 3 odd questions minimum will come from the core theory topics. So we'll kind of touch upon these theory, touch upon these topics as well. उसके अंदर जो theory है, again covering all the questions which are there in the past RTPs, MTPs, exams, and even the old practice manual and the new study material to the extent possible. So just kind of go through this, understand the important keywords, see if you kind of have a few terms, remember them, and review that before the exams as well. You again, as we said earlier, you don't kind of have to read this like you read an audit, like you read word to word, remembering stuff, not needed. It is to be read as if you're reading a newspaper, in the sense that you read through stuff, get understanding, proceed. So when we read a newspaper, if we read a newspaper, we kind of do that, we kind of glance through it, right? We don't read it like we read an audit thing that you have to remember every point. No, that's not necessarily the case. You understand it to start with. In the second time when you're referring it, try to mark out a few keywords. First time just understanding, second time just a few keywords, and third time just trying to retain those keywords and your understanding. Are we clear with this? Okay, so we have already done chapter 1 and 2 currently. If we go in our sequence of financial policy, corporate strategy and risk management. Next we have capital budgeting. It's a relatively new chapter, and hence we don't have enough past questions or literature on this from the study material. Which all questions are there, we are covering it. But other than that, for other topics you'll have a lot of RTPs, MTPs and stuff to cover upon. So we look at a question involving a theory question on what is a certainty equivalent approach. Now we have done a sum on this, but if certainty equivalent comes, what does it mean? We try to predict what we call as certain cash flows, not total cash flows but certain cash flows, and we try to find the project evaluation considering a certainty equivalent factor. A project which has a higher uncertainty element will have a lower certainty factor. A project which has a higher certainty element will have a higher certainty factor. The moment you calculate certain cash flows, how do you calculate certain cash flows? These are calculated as your expected cash flows into the certainty equivalent factor. Once you calculate certain cash flows, you will discount the certain cash flows at the risk-free rate in order to find the project NPV. When we look at the risk-free rate, why? Because now the cash flows are certain, and hence we can do the discounting at the risk-free rate. So over here, this is on certainty equivalent. Next, you have what is sensitivity analysis. So when we look at sensitivity analysis, this is practically a very important analysis. So when we look at sensitivity, we try to figure out how sensitive a project's NPV is to a particular individual, for example cash flow. So when we look at project NPV, we try to say that we look at various inputs, and vis-a-vis those inputs, like let's say sales, let's say cost, fixed cost, how sensitive it is. The more the sensitivity, the more the project risk in terms of that particular individual input. Are we clear with this? So this is called as sensitivity analysis. Generally you can answer two common questions in terms of the institute's working. First, we ask ourselves that if there is a adverse, let us say 10% change in a particular factor, how much impact will it have on my project NPV? The higher the impact, more is the sensitivity, lower the impact, lesser is the sensitivity. Second is, how much percentage change in that factor should arise for me to reach a break-even level. So if I am having a positive NPV, we are saying how much percentage should sales price change to reach a zero NPV. For example, if sales price only changes by 2% and we reach a zero NPV, that is a very risky project. Why? Because you have very less margin for error. you kind of price your products a little less and your entire NPV gets wiped off. However, if your buffer is around 15, 20, 30, 40%, we'll say, okay, we have a fairly big cushion on pricing. Are we clear with this? So this is regarding sensitivity analysis. Next, you look at project appraisal under inflationary conditions, particularly notable in countries like ours and maybe in other countries where inflation is a very big economic problem. So over here, directly predicting cash flows is not really the only way, because the cash flows will change due to inflation. In fact, different cash flows like sales, different cash flows like inputs might have different inflationary impacts. Like when we look at sales, there might be a 10% inflation, but in terms of cost, there might be a 20% inflation, and hence we will predict what is called as nominal cash flows. And these nominal cash flows will be discounted at nominal discount rates in order to find the project NPV. So when we need to evaluate or consider inflation in cash flows, we will consider escalation in our costs. Different elements of cost will have different escalation elements. We'll try to predict the escalation, and we will also look at the necessary adjustments to be made in profitability to take care of the inflationary situation. Examine the financial viability of the project at the revised rates and assess the same with reference to economic justification. What we usually say over here is you will consider the nominal cash flows and discount them at the nominal rate to find, let us say, the NPV. Okay. Steps involved in simulation analysis. Again, these are pure theory. I don't really we don't have any past history for capital budgeting. So these are your study material questions. In your study material, behind these questions are given. So when we look at sensitivity analysis, that is changing a particular input, but there can be multiple inputs that can change at one point. So what do you do in simulation? Simulation, we assign random numbers to different important crucial outputs, and then we run, let us say, what we call as sample simulations, where let's say if the project life was 9 years, what if the cash flow was, let's say, 30,000? What if your input costing? So we run various simulations and try to find the NPV at various simulations, and here you are taking very random situations that can happen and running maybe hundreds and thousands of those permutations, combinations to find the NPV. So over here you will model the project, figure out which are the important parameters, specify the values of parameters and probabilities, probabilities being the most important. Determine the probabilities, because based on that you will assign random numbers. Select value at random from the probability distribution. So we have done some also on simulation where we kind of try to figure out what the different probabilities are, and jitna probability hai utne random numbers. It's like drawing cheats and putting random numbers. Determine NPV corresponding to the randomly generated value and repeat 3 and 4 a large number of times. So you will keep on finding NPVs at different values, and then you will try to plot the probability distribution to find out your final average NPV. Are we clear with this? Okay, next we will go to the chapter on security analysis. This is security analysis and security valuation are two chapters which we kind of combine, and we call a chapter called as security valuation over here. So this is security analysis and security valuation together. Valuation of securities, we call this as a combined chapter. So first is explain the various factors in economic analysis. So we are trying to look at analysis for a security considering the large economic scenarios. Like sometimes in case of economic analysis, we look at the best case scenario, worst case scenario, average scenario. But what are the factors? Well, usually growth in national income. India ka itna favorable hai is largely because people predict that India's GDP is going to go really fast. So the growth in national income or GDP etc. is a very important factor to consider while you do an overall economic analysis. So national income is an important parameter. Then growth rates in the industrial sector. One important growth rate number is called as IIP, Index of Industrial Production. So what we try to see is how fast your industrial sectors are growing, and that will give us an overall understanding of how your economy is probably growing. Like you might have read very recently that China injected close to $71 billion in their economy because their economy is kind of slowing down. They want to put a stimulus. So China ka jo production hai, it is not growing as fast. Maybe the Chinese economy is not growing as fast. So over here you look at the growth of the industrial sectors. Inflation, a very, very important barometer for a lot of economies to see how their economies are faring. You might be growing well, but if a large part of it is eaten up by inflation, that growth is not real. Are we clear with this? So inflation, and then not in every economy, but at least in our economy, monsoon plays a massive role. So just say a large part of our population relies on agriculture, and if the monsoon is bad, the farmers, we are not as well irrigated, and hence the farmers lose their income. And then if our economy is more like a consumption driven economy, we say India mein log itna interested kyun hai? Among other things, population is our asset, and because population is considered to be, let us say, our asset, we look at, let us say, monsoon as a very important barometer. If the monsoon is normal, agriculture farmers get enough income and hence they have enough money to spend. If the monsoon is bad, inherently their spending power goes down and hence your overall economy does not do well. And monsoon is something which cannot be controlled by governments, etc. You can manage GDP, interest rate, etc. but you cannot really manage monsoons, and hence 4 factors, if you have to remember, if the question comes affecting economic analysis, what are the 4 factors? National income or GDP, industrial production, then inflation, as well as monsoon. There can be other factors as well, but these are the factors which are there in the material, so we will probably focus on those. Next, you have a lot of sums on this. Mention the various techniques used in economic analysis. Various indicators that can be used to access the performance of an economy. So there are basically 3 important barometers. One is anticipatory surveys. A lot of times, I don't know in your college you have such things or not, but a lot of colleges require you to do some research. अपन अपने friends को Google form भेजते and we say जबरदस्ती भरवाते, so please fill this form. So you are taking kind of a survey from people, but ये जबरदस्ती वाला नहीं होता है. People are, some serious people will volunteer and they will kind of fill out surveys on what they anticipate. A very common research firms like Macquarie, CLSA, Goldman Sachs, what they reach out is, they reach out to the top, जो Fortune 500 सुना अपन, they will reach out to the Fortune 500 CEO or CFO and ask them a set of questions on how the CEOs expect the market to go in the next few years, and that gives them a very good understanding, anticipation on how the economy is going to grow, because these are people who are running the top corporations. An average thought process, they kind of compile that what are the trends which are common in these top 500 or top BSE ke jo companies hai, and they will try to identify those trends. These are anticipatory survey. One of the most common things to kind of rely, you are not relying on just one CEO, you are relying on the think tank of a lot of influential minds of your economy. So anticipatory surveys, a set of questions will be asked and based on that common trends will be evolved. Then barometer or indicator approach. Barometer or indicator approach would mean maybe you look at 3 factors, like you have a leading indicator, coincidental indicator, as well as lagging indicator. As the name goes, a leading indicator would be an indicator which leads. So something which changes and you kind of believe that this is going to result in a particular move. Like for example, if let us say the stock market is changing in a particular way, usually stock market factors in what is going to happen in the future. So इसको अपन usually बोलते हैं leading indicator है. They don't wait for things to go bad. Before that only the market movements would try to indicate it, or maybe the interest rates are changing in a particular way. So a lot of these indicators lead. So we will say if a particular change is happening, maybe it is a precursor to something which is going to happen later, leading indicator. Coincidental indicators will happen almost at the same time, whereas lagging indicators, as the name goes, will show you data after the economic event has actually panned out. तो अभी आपको पता नहीं है कि are we actually in a recession or not. So there are some indicators which will show that recession चालू हो गया है. As a student, that it's always given to you, but practically if someone asks you today, are we in a boom, are we in a recession, what is going on, it's very difficult to pinpoint and say. So we'll have to look at certain indicators, maybe leading, maybe coincidental, or maybe lagging indicators. So these are three, and then economic model building approach. So you will have models, financial models, which try to throw some output. Are we clear? So what are the three important numbers? If we have to look at ways to do economic analysis, first is what? Anticipatory survey. Second is what? Indicators. Indicators or barometers can be three. Which are the three? Leading, coincidental, lagging, and lastly you will have model building. So you will have financial models. आप कितनी बार once you qualify you'll say अभी what do you want to do? It's a very big buzzword. We want to learn financial modeling. So financial modeling over here is like economic model building. You're trying to build a model where you put in some inputs and whereby it throws up some data which is an output. Are you clear with this? Okay, next you have factors affecting industry analysis. Now from the economy we are going to the industry. Top down. Top में economy आता है and after that you get the industry. The funnel narrows down. So when we look at, let us say, industry analysis, you are looking at a product, a particular industry. Like maybe the EV industry is an industry we say is emerging, but maybe an IC engine, the petrol diesel engine industry, maybe it may be at the end of their product life. So we are doing an industry analysis of the product life cycle. Like the product has a life cycle in general. The demand picks up, reaches a particular plateau and then probably declines. So we are trying to figure out that the industry in which you are planning to invest, where does it sit in the overall product life cycle? Yes. Second is the demand supply gap. Obviously, if there is very high demand in a particular product, like batteries, अगर आपके पास अच्छा खासा बैटरी का मैन्युफैक्चरिंग बेस है, we are expecting the demand to be massive that way. Lithium से बनते हैं. So if you believe that you are a lithium mining company, not an coal or oil mining company, a lithium mining company which will have a lot more value in today's scenario as compared to, let us say, a traditional coal mining company. Are we clear with this? So demand supply gap, barriers to entry, very interesting, okay. And maybe you may not have seen this over the cycle, but today you get access to really good content from a lot of faculties. Really good faculties, because now the barrier to entry is very low. Even earlier, if you go, when we used to study, there would be only a few institutions, because if someone wanted to start coaching, I need to have classrooms, I need to have infrastructure, I need to have a team of faculties. Right now you need a camera, you need a decent internet connection, and you can put data up on YouTube, right? So that ways the barrier to entry is low, and if the barrier to entry is low, the market becomes very crowded. But if the barrier to entry is inherently very high, the barrier can be due to various things, maybe huge capital investment, maybe huge intellectual capability, whatever be the reason. A lot of people want to enter into industry as investors where the barrier to entry is very high. If a company is in a market where barrier to entry बहुत high है, मुश्किल है to get into the industry, then you are having a unique possibility by threat of competition is relatively less. Barriers to entry. The barrier can be due to a very high capital. अभी आप AI देखो, सब जगह AI बोल रहे हैं. But if I want to do something meaningful in AI, big at a big level, yeah, I need billions of dollars. Now I have to compete directly with Amazon, Meta, all of these, Google, OpenAI, etc. Huge amounts, right? Barrier is already very high. NVIDIA is a very good example of this barrier to entry. अभी वो जो GPU बनाता है, graphic processing units, it has that technological capability which is very difficult for other companies to kind of replicate. The barrier to entry is very high that way. Not anyone who can. चलो GPU बना लेते, not be able to make as good as GPUs that NVIDIA is making, for example. Government attitude towards your industry. Attitude of government is important on the crucial development for your industry. Like if I'm an EV industry and the government is encouraging electrical vehicles, it's much more likely that my industry will flourish. Okay, like apne CA mein people are saying that maybe the government's attitude may not be as how do I put it in a not so politically, so it's not as, I mean people believe that इसके लिए हमारे ऊपर ICI के ऊपर भी नाफरा आ चुका है. So now there is an oversight के भाई the general thought process is CA setting करने में ज़्यादा help करता है. तो करते नहीं करते आपको ज़्यादा पता है. We are in the education side, you are helping people doing what they want to do. So they say कि no, there is a lot of things which are happening. If the government attitude is positive, your growth is going to be relatively higher. If the government attitude is not as positive, maybe you might face challenges. And state of competition in the industry, obviously this is very important. If you have a very high degree of competition, your pricing power is much more lower, it gets diluted. If you are in a monopoly type of a situation, your pricing power is much more stronger. So when we look at industry analysis, around 5-6 दूसरे भी है, cost, conditions and profitability, technology and research. Now in general, in most of these questions, आपको याद रखना, your theory question cannot be more than 4 marks. None of the questions come more than 4 marks. So generally 4 points in any big question also, or maybe safety के लिए 5-6 एक दो आपका normal loss आप भूल जाओगे. So that ways even यहाँ पे तो 7-8 point है, some question में 10-15 points. There is no chance that you are getting a theory question which involves writing 15 points, because आपका 4 mark का question आना है theory का. So that way you don't have to remember 15 points. If you remember even 4-5 points, you are good to go. Like in this case, when I look at economy, I need to see the GDP, I need to see inflation, I need to see monsoon. But when I come to my specific industry, I need to look at industry specific factors, which can be the product life cycle where I am sitting on my industry, which may be how big are the barriers to entry, demand supply gap, government's attitude, cost and profitability, etc. Are we clear with this? Okay. Next you have this, it's a very specific term. If you kind of co-location or proximity hosting. Now this is a little technical, so unless you read this you will not really understand this. Now earlier, have you seen movies like Guru? देखा है अपने Guru? So earlier how the markets used to operate was an open outcry system. Open outcry system का मतलब समझते अपन? There would be a trading ring and where people would quite literally go, and अपन जब भी सब्जी के मार्केट में जाते हैं ना, तो people से ना आलू 15 रुपए किलो, 15 रुपए किलो, people would literally shout the price of Reliance. So Reliance इतने पे, so that is open outcry. How would the order matching happen? Order matching would happen, आप जितना जोर से चिल्ला सकते. So that means people will hear you, they will come, they will do deals, and that is done. So only traders who had the trading license, and that is very expensive, can enter into that trading ring and they can facilitate trades. Later we went into tech where BSc में आज अगर आप सुने तो बोल्ट करके सिस्टम है where automatic order matching has to happen, and that also access was given to brokers who can come to the exchange and do that. Earlier it was that they had to come to the BSc, they had to come to that big BSc building and they had to trade, though not shouting but by doing. So they said that this is becoming a little tedious for us, so they allowed proximity hosting, which means I can host that entire program, not necessarily in the exchange but even in your premises, which is in the proximity or nearby, co-location. So the trading is now decentralized. Earlier क्या होता था, open outcry. Open outcry would, everyone has to come to the trading ring and shout. After that open outcry say we went, we said no, we need to see regulation, and hence people had to come to the BSc, and over there they could trade online but coming to the BSc. Are we clear with this? And then they started permitting co-location or proximity hosting, where to the eligible people they would allow to host So proximity hosting is a facility which was offered by the exchange to the brokers and data vendors, whereby the trading or vending systems are allowed to be located within or at close proximity to the exchanges and allowed to connect with the trading platform through a direct or a private network. So now this is much more popular, and because of which you can access so much data on the go. You can even trade it looking at the screens. So this is co-location or proximity hosting. So you can locate at premises other than the exchange as well through a direct or a private connection network. बराबर. So ये word आपको पता होना चाहिए, and then you can write a few terms next to that. Efficient market theory we have studied. What does efficient market theory over here say? So explain the challenges to the efficient market theory. We have studied regularly efficient market theory, if you remember, long time back. There were three types of market. Which were the three forms? Weak form, semi-strong form, strong form. So these were various forms of market efficiency. However, there are certain challenges, drawbacks of this. First is, these efficient market theories are based on a set of assumptions, but that is provided if full information is available. So the general assumption is full information is available, but that is not necessarily the case practically. There is information inadequacy. Again, you have limited information processing ability. एक information announce होता है. So that does not mean you are able to process that information very accurately. So it will take time for people to process that information because people have limited. ऐसा नहीं कि semi strong बोलता है कि the moment information is announced, effect will be there. People will take time to absorb that effect. Irrational behavior. Again, this is one of the most common problems. Generally, every economic theory assumes that investors are rational, but time and again, we have always found that investor behavior has a lot of times being irrational, and hence irrational behavior can not necessarily confirm efficient market theory. So, like there is this thing, there was L.C. Gupta, who was a notable economic researcher, who said, who found that market evaluation process work haphazardly, almost like a blind man firing a gun. Market seems to function largely on hit and miss tactics rather than on basis of informed beliefs and long-term prospects. So, like you look at a company like Zomato, for example. Not more than a year back, Zomato was like a punching bag for everyone, and उसका price एकदम नीचे close to 40, 45, 50 तक चले गया था. And everyone to say कि यार ये थोड़ी ना चलने वाला है, but now if you go to see, एक साल में Zomato is doing as well as it was doing a year back, but now it is significantly higher. It's into hundreds, maybe 200 के आस 200 के ऊपर है. So that ways, market behavior is not very rational. The fundamentals and the business model even there was the same, now is also by and large the same. And monopolistic influence. A market is considered as highly competitive, as no single buyer or seller is supposed to have influence. However, that is not necessarily the case, especially for small cap and mid cap companies. For large cap, yes, a lot of people have free float, but small cap, mid cap, no. It's not necessary that there may be the promoter or a few financial brokers. Harshad Mehta का आपने देखा, did he have enough influence? Yes. And as a result, it is not necessary that everyone has same power. There might be people who have deeper power. So there are 4 challenges to efficient market. First of all, information itself might be inadequate. Second, even if information is given, people's ability to process that information will not be complete. Third, people would behave irrationally in response to certain events. And lastly, there may be some people, you might be doing all fundamental analysis, but अगर 70-80% of the shares are owned by the promoter, वही demand supply manage कर पा रहा. So the prices may not necessarily move based on your analysis. Are we clear with this? 4 things. Again, help me with this. First is information inadequacy. Second is what? Limited information processing abilities. Third is irrational behavior. And fourth is monopolistic influence. Okay, next you have technical analysis. As we said, in terms of technical analysis, this is based on the fact that prices will repeat a pattern. So what has happened in the past will repeat in the future. So this is crowd psychology and tools of technical analysis help you in identifying that. Shift in demand and supply are gradual rather than instantaneous, and fundamentals about the company is observed and assimilated over a period of time. You can't change the fundamentals every second, but prices change every second. So this is kind of what the technical analysis kind of believe. The people who do not believe in technical analysis believe that it is a useless information because they are not able to offer explanation for tools employed. Empirical evidence is there in support of a random walk. Random walk is the price changes are random, they are not really based on a particular pattern. By the time the uptrend and downtrend may have, ये सबसे बड़ा problem है. By the time an uptrend or downtrend is signaled by technical factors, वो move up या down हो चुका होगा. By the time the factors indicate it, the move must have already happened. So it is kind of not really helpful for you. It might show you a trend after the trend has actually happened. And technical analysis again is a self-defeating proposition. Why? The more the people that they do technical analysis, less is likely that you will make profit, because the more the people doing it, more the people will be thinking the way you are thinking. Yes. Okay. Next you have something called as a random walk theory. ये जैसे random walk है, Elliott wave है. These things you just need to know what it means. They say market moves like a drunkard man. Like if you are very high, you नहीं, let's say किसी और का example लेते हैं. Let's say you are very high. You can move one step like this. Next step किधर गिरेगा किसी को नहीं पता. You can move this side, that side. So we are saying the market moves like a drunkard person. It is very difficult to predict what is the next step a drunkard person is going to take. It is the case with the market. So you might be doing all of this analysis, but it is hit in the dark type of a thing, because the market movements are by and large random movements. And over here it says that the behavior of the stock market is unpredictable and there is no relationship between the present prices and future prices. They are of the view that ये सब मेहनत करके फायदा ही नहीं है, because stock prices cannot be projected. I told you earlier also they did an experiment with a monkey and some fund managers, and the monkey did almost as well as the fund managers did in picking up stocks, because the monkey picked it up at random. Stock managers ने बहुत सोचा, तो आपने इतना जो FM पढ़ाई की है, आपका नॉलेज एक बंदर के जितना है अप्रोक्स. So that is what the random walk theory is trying to say, right? So over here, नहीं उससे they might be saying what they are saying, but obviously people who have made money by at least getting some bets right, and not all bets are random for sure, but that is a theory. Then explain Dow Jones theory. Now there was a guy called as Charles Dow. Have you heard about Dow Jones person? Yes, it is one of an important US indicator. So Charles Dow ने बोला दो मेरे जो averages है वो बहुत important averages है. Dow Jones Industrial Average. So over here DJIA, Dow Jones Industrial Average, and Dow Jones Transportation Average. So you just remember these two. So he said you kind of look at these two indicators, इनका average लेना है. So the averages you would say, and they show the movement. So there is a movement called as a primary movement, which is a main trend. Then there is something called as a secondary movement, which is a shorter duration in trend. So what is a primary movement? So you see something like this, right? So the primary movement goes up. Oh, sorry. So you see something like this, maybe it is going up. So over here the primary movement, it goes up and down, but by and large it is going up. That is a primary movement. When we look at the secondary movement means मेरा market तो bullish है. However, एक correction करके word आता है. Correction means the market is going up. For some times it goes down, then again it goes up. So that correction is the secondary movement. It is opposite of the primary movement. So market is going up, but correction में वो नीचे जाएगा. It gives you buying opportunity. Again market goes up. Again side team, but it is by and large going up. Are we clear with this? Whereas when you look at secondary movement, that is opposite of the primary movement. Are we clear with this? So he said that you look at DJIA and DJTA, Dow Jones Industrial Average, Dow Jones transportation average, and based on that you predict. So these are 4-5 words that you should know. Primary movement, that is the main trend. Secondary movement, which is a shorter, and it is opposite in direction. So that is more than sufficient. Dow Jones industrial average as well as transportation average, figuring out the primary movement, which is a long term movement, and then secondary movement, which is a shorter term movement, but it is opposite of the primary movement. And you will try to figure out your market structure looking at that. That is what the Dow Jones theory tries to say. Then a more refinement of this would be something called as an Elliott wave theory. So पहले हमने क्या बोला, random walk. Random walk means the market movements are random. Share prices don't depend on what is happening in the past. Then we moved on to Dow Jones theory, where we said that we look at a couple of averages, and based on that we see how they have moved over the longer term, primary and secondary. And then there is Elliott wave, which is kind of a refinement of Dow Jones theory only, where they say that the movements are largely two types. One is impulsive pattern and one is corrective pattern. So impulsive pattern is like the primary movement. Remember in Dow Jones we said the primary movement, which is going up, that is that main core underlying pattern, whereas corrective patterns are the opposite of. So if you go on the next page, you can see a chart type of a thing. So if you see the chart over here, you see that wave 1 going up, then going down, wave 2, you can see overall this is going up. That is your impulsive overall movement going up, but within that wave 2, wave 4 वो नीचे जा रहा है, wave 2 and wave 4 is going down, so that is kind of the opposite. So that is called as corrective movements, that is reaction waves. Impulsive को we say basic waves, whereas corrective को we say reactive or opposite waves. Are we clear with this? Okay. What are market indicators? A few market indicators are discussed over here. One is the breadth index. It covers all the securities. You will see almost every day CNBC पे आता है. What is market breadth? What आपने कभी CNBC खोला? Yes, you see sometimes the ticker keeps on changing. They say BSE इतना change हुआ, Nifty इतना change हुआ, dollar इतना change हुआ. They will almost always show market breadth. What does market breadth show? Increase, decrease on the overall market. So if market has, for example, 5,000 stocks, BSE में तो Sensex में सिर्फ 30 stocks है. I want to see across the breadth of the market how many stocks have improved, how many stocks have gone down. Market breadth. So if out of 5,000, maybe 4,000 stocks have gone up and 1,000 stocks have gone down, the breadth is 4:1. 4 increases for 1 decline. Are we clear with this? And you will see a lot of times, okay, a lot of times. Sensex and Nifty का जो movement है is not necessarily the movement जो small cap, mid cap का movement होता है. It's quite different. If you ask your parents or your friends or relatives who are seasoned investors, they will say Nifty तो बढ़े जा रहा है, हमारा portfolio नहीं बढ़ रहा है. अपने को लगता है फेंक रहा है. जरूरी नहीं है. It is possible that Nifty might go up because Nifty is large cap. Someone might have taken mid cap, small cap bets. Portfolio is not changing. So I want to see the market breadth. I say, "Bhai, ठीक है, large cap might go up, but is market in general going up?" So that is the breadth index. Next, you have volume of transactions. Very important. Technical indicators generally सिर्फ price देख के कुछ भी नहीं करते. They look at the price at adequate volumes. So if price change is backed by adequate volumes, that is a much more convincing move as compared to just inadequate volumes. Not a very convincing move. Volume is very important when you look at technical movements. Confidence index reveals how investors are willing to take a chance in the market. It is a ratio of high grade bond yields to low grade bond yields. So you are trying to see how high grade, like a AAA graded bond, versus what is the rate in a lower rated bond, let's say a B rated, C rated type of a bond. We will see that. Generally when the markets are very high, people lend to almost everyone. So the lending happens, but in tougher markets, the bigger people will get lending, lower people, for them to get lending, they will have to pay a much higher spread. Relative strength analysis suggests that the price of some securities rise relatively faster in a bull market and decline slower in the bear market. There is some odd lot theory. This is a contrary opinion where an average person is usually wrong and the wise course of action is to pursue strategies contrary to popular opinion. This is what almost every big investor says this, कि the moment stock market के अंदर naive people, it's a little, I would say, old school, but so don't take wrong gender type of notations, but in the older days people used to say the moment your housewives start entering the stock market is the time you exit the stock market, because इतना बोलबाला हो रहा है कि अभी सबको अंदर आना है, that is the time you exit. That is what older investors used to say. That is a very controversial statement to make today, but this was an older thought. That the current thought is, if everyone is around you is talking कि मैंने पैसा डाला और मैं पैसा कमा रहा हूँ, that is the time you quietly exit, because a fall is coming. That is when, so that is a contrary opinion. So when everyone is exiting, you buy. Contrary view रहता है, where everyone is entering, you should exit. So there are other मार्केट इंडिकेटर्स एज वेल. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि ये 4-5 ही है. अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल लुक एट विक्स करके एक इंडिकेटर होता है, वॉलेटिलिटी इंडेक्स, अ लॉट ऑफ अदर इंडिकेटर्स, बट इंस्टीट्यूट ने 4-5 दी अपने को लिख के आने को, राइट. ओके, सो दिस इज अ थियरी थिंग, यू डोंट हैव टू डू मच ओवर हियर. व्हाट आर द इंडिकेटर्स वी शुड रिमेंबर? breadth index, increase decrease across the breadth of the market. Second, you have volume, you should always track. Who tracks volume? You track share prices. कोई volume देखते देखना चाहिए, because movements backed by volume are convincing movements. Volume without, not so convincing movements. वो ऐसे ही it's not a very convincing move if it is without volume. Then you look at confidence index, relative strength index, odd lot theory. हर एक में आपको 2-4 वर्ड पता होना चाहिए. Like confidence index क्या है? High grade, low grade bond के बीच में. Breadth index, all of this 2-4 word you know, and I think you can write an answer. In any case, इतना सारा अगर आप देखें for 4 marks, even आप रट्टा भी मार के हो, ओपन बुक आप लिखो भी, आपके पास इतना लिखना नहीं चाहिए. Even if it's an open book exam, you should not write so much for 4 marks. It will take so much time. You can write short in your own words, and that's absolutely acceptable. Examiner भी heading ही पढ़ने वाला है. और 2-4 important words. Describe theory on which technical analysis is based. Market discounts everything. Next, price moves happen in trends. This is what technical analysis always believe, that there is a trend in which it moves, and history tends to repeat itself. What has happened in the past will repeat in the future, and hence what we are studying is what has happened in the past, so we can get an insight of what is likely to happen in the future. Efficient market theory, and what is a major misconception regarding this theory. So when you look at an efficient market theory, this was given by Eugene Fama in the 1960s. They had around 3 things. The theory states that no one can beat the market. That is what the theory used to say. Like eventually your market will become efficient, and strong form efficient, you cannot really beat the market. So the misconception is, those 4 things that you had studied, वो different ways में यहाँ पे study किया. Remember the challenges of efficient market in information inadequacy, limited processing abilities, irrational behavior. So to believe that no one can beat the market is wrong. People have managed to beat the market, and to believe that no one can beat, that is based on a set of assumptions which exist in theory, not practically. Okay. Next, explain the types of tests that can be employed empirically to verify the efficient market theory. Serial correlation test. So there are 3 or 4 tests: runs test and filter rules test. You had sums on these. See, ये अपन ने शायद अभी आपके यहाँ पे नहीं होगा. We have added that from the RTP November 24. We will share a separate addendum. Recent RTPs etc. It's there. So they have mentioned 3 tests which is there in your actual theory, in your main shield. There was a serial correlation. What was serial correlation meaning? Trying to test the correlation with your own self. Remember we discussed that you had 20 days. 20 days में से you split the first 10 days and the next 10 days. Assume they are 2 separate stocks. See how they are correlated. If they are correlated very highly, what risky है, because there is dependency. You can predict the next 10 moves looking at the first 10 days. So then the market is not very efficient. But if the movements are random, you can't predict what is happening in the next 10 days looking at the first 10 days. Well, market movements are random. Are we clear with this? Serial correlation. Then there was a runs test का खतरनाक question हुआ करता था. There was a big formula, a lot of things that runs, positive runs, negative runs, are the runs within a range, that is a runs test. And again filters test, you kind of put in filters and based on that see how the movements are. So these are a few question, economic analysis in the, इसमें कुछ भी randomly आ सकता है. No one can tell you कि इसमें से यही आएगा. Like for securitization, startup finance, all of that we can say कि ये सब है important, can possibly come. यहाँ पे they can pick up anything randomly. So glance through everything, remember the keywords, and उसके बाद once you know the keywords, you are expert in manufacturing a big essay. आपको 4 वर्ड पता होना चाहिए. आप 4 पेज लिख सकते हैं, बट 4 वर्ड तो पता होना चाहिए अपने को, राइट? सो otherwise Dow Jones theory, you can't write anything if Dow Jones theory comes, but if something is there, you can always write enough literature, looking at the marks, right? अपन back working करते, 2 मार्क का इतना लिखने का. अपने को बीकॉम में बोलते हैं ना 4 मार्क्स इतना होना चाहिए, 8 मार्क्स इतना होना चाहिए, इतने पेज भरने ही चाहिए, राइट? ओके. सो नेक्स्ट यू हैव सिक्योरिटी वैल्यूएशन. दिस इज ऑन रिवर्स स्टॉक स्प्लिट. Reverse stock split is nothing but share consolidation. What do you mean by share consolidation? It means that my stock will have one share is of rupees 10 each. I want to consolidate it and consolidate 10 shares into one share of rupees 100 each. Why do people do reverse stock splits? To increase the share price. So generally, if your share price is very less, 2 rupees, 5 rupees, 3 rupees, these are called as penny stocks. And we would say कि यार इसके why should you invest over here? भले हम आर्टिकल है, हमारा इज्जत है, 2 रुपए के शेयर में थोड़ी ना पैसा डालेंगे, right? So we will look at bigger shares at least, and as a result, if I want to bring my share into the investors radar, I will consolidate shares and bundle it into a slightly bigger share. Are we clear with this? That is share consolidation. So why do people do that? Maybe to avoid delisting. Maybe some stocks might have कि इतने प्राइस के नीचे जाएगा तो you'll have to delist. So I can avoid delisting or avoid removal from constituents of index. Avoid the tag of penny stock and attract institutional investors and mutual funds who might not really look at very small stocks. Next, can a company with no commercial operations raise funds via IPO? And then you have a term called as SPAC. SPAC is very common in US. India में नहीं चल रहा है. आज के तारीख में you don't really have as much regulations pertaining to SPAC. Now what is SPAC? As a concept you should know. देखो इतना बड़ा theory देकर रखा, कहाँ पे याद रखे? यानी आपके पास बुक तो है नहीं. So over here you have a huge theory base given. Understand the word SPAC and you can kind of write an answer for that. So what does an SPAC do? India may remember SPACs are currently as we speak. Maybe by the time you give your exams SPAC आ जाए. बात हो रहा है SPAC इंडिया में आने का, आज के तारीख में नहीं है. Special purpose acquisition companies. Let us say I have a good knack of picking up companies. I have a fairly good knack of picking up companies, but I don't have enough money to pick up companies. So what do? I form a kind of a shell company. I tell the world that I will do an IPO. I will raise, for example, 100 crores. किसके लिए 100 crores? You give me 100 crores. Over a period of 2 or 3 years, we will buy out a few companies. Which companies? आप मेरे पे भरोसा रखो. That is what SPAC quite literally is. I will buy a few companies, turn them around, and आपका scheme में पैसा double, triple, चौबल जो भी है. And people give money to this. A lot of SPACs are run by turnaround specialists. Like people would have Wilbur Ross करके एक है. So they are turnaround specialists. So people would say यार ये बंदा है, he will find good companies, he will turn it around, but it's a chicken and egg. For him to buy a company, he needs money first. When the opportunity comes, अगर उसके पास पैसा ही नहीं है, वो company buy कहाँ से करेगा? So let us give the money, and the money goes into an SPAC. SPAC has a time frame, maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. They say within that I will buy the company. If not, I will give you your money back. But I will usually buy a company and then try to turn it around and give you the money back. It's a fairly risky proposition, and hence India में SEBI is not very comfortable having SPAC because देखो an Indian investor might give money and there may be people who are fly by night पैसा लेके चले गए or they put it in company बोला पैसा डूब गया. So they are saying that no, the regulations or the market structure is not as evolved that people blindly give money at a IPO level. अभी आपको एक alternative fund है, उसमें HNI has to invest तो करने दो. इंडियन पब्लिक बहुत इनोसेंट है, किधर भी पैसा डाल सकता है. आज के तारीख में आप देखो IPO frenzy is crazy. People are putting money anywhere, left, right and center. अभी ऐसे कंपनी में अगर आप पहले अभी आपके पास भले we discussed a few months back there was a company which was a showroom, उसको पैसा मिला. गुजरात में एक कंपनी था जो एक छोटा सा पैकेजिंग का दुकान चल रहा था, उसको भी बहुत पैसा मिला, बट कुछ तो चल रहा था. एसबैक में तो कुछ भी नहीं चलता है. There is absolutely nothing that is going on. It is just a balance sheet which is empty with a promise that I will take your money, deploy it and turn it around. SEBI as we speak is not very comfortable with SPAC, but people are saying that वेंचर कैपिटल, प्राइवेट इक्विटी, ये सब में एक छोटा बंदा थोड़ी ना पैसा डालता है. आपने कभी सुना है PY टिकट साइज आर ह्यूज. यानी इफ यू वांट टू पुट इट इन एन नॉर्मल AIF आपको 1-1 करोड़ डालना पड़ता है. अभी कहां से लाएंगे इतना पैसा? सो दैट वेज दिस विल मे बी make it open for a smaller guy to even invest, but that is a feature of an evolved market. What is happening in India right now happened in the US in the 1999s जब भी .com bubble burst हुआ. The venture capital Silicon Valley बोलते सुना आपने? Silicon Valley is that entire Stanford और California, सैन फ्रांसिस्को का जो एरिया है, जो इंडिया का भी बैंगलोर बोला जाता है, बेंगलुरु. सो इंडिया में अभी वो बन रहा है इकोसिस्टम. So they have reached a stage where their investors understand what is happening. अपन ने बबल फटते हुए देखा ही नहीं है. They have seen the bubble bursting, and hence we are not very comfortable with SPACs as we speak. So there is a lot of pressure on SEBI to allow SPACs. What do you want? You understand what is meant by SPACs? Okay. So in SPAC, where an entity is set up with an objective to raise funds through an IPO to finance a merger or acquisition of an unidentified target. There is no target identified within specified period. It is commonly known as a blank check company. And then they have given you certain features, and then at the end they have said that SEBI currently does not really have SPACs as a base. Are we clear with this? Okay. Idea of quant fund, ये आजकल काफी चल रहा है. Quant fund. Have you heard about the word quant trading? Algo type of trading होता है where you have your own thoughts and then you tell a computer that this is the point where you trade and this is the quantity at which you trade. I give you kind of a power of attorney. You don't have to come and ask me. If particular levels are touched, quant, in this particular quantity, you will buy or sell. I give you the authorization. These are called as quant funds. So over here, it's a data-driven approach for stock selection or investment decisions based on a predetermined rules or parameters using statistics or mathematical models. So over here, you will identify important parameters and you will say if this happens. Like अभी 3-4 दिन पहले मैंने ये पढ़ा था that 50-day EMA across for the first time has gone down in a lot of time. So the markets are now expected to kind of go lower. So this is a point that you might have put in inside a software and say कि ये अगर लेवल ब्रीच होता है तू बेच, मेरे को पूछ भी मत, तू बेच दे, इतने क्वांटिटी में यू सेल. एंड यू हैव आइडेंटिफाइड, यू हैव पुट स्टॉप लॉस, यू हैव पुट लेट अस से, सो यू पुट एवरीथिंग इन द लिमिट्स. आप बैठ के मजे कर रहे हो एंड ट्रेडिंग कंप्यूटर कर रहे हो. सुनने में आसान लगता है, अगेन है नहीं, राइट? ओके. सो ओवर हियर दिस इज regarding quant funds. Again at the end we have said overall it can be said that whether it is human or machine, it is not as easy to beat the market. Even if it is quant funds, it sounds to be sophisticated, not very easy to kind of beat the market. Okay, then you have something as modified duration is a proxy and not an accurate measure for change in price due to change in interest rate. Again, remember long time back we did duration. And duration में we said duration measures a linear change in price, but actually price curve convex होता है. So there was a concept called as convexity. अपने को word के आगे कुछ भी याद नहीं है, but you have something called as convexity, and convexity used to say that the curve is not straight, it is linear, and hence For a change in interest rate, duration may not be able to accurately predict the price because largely because of the convexity. As you see the word convexity over here, largely because of the convexity, you will not be able to predict it very accurately. Okay, money market and its features. What was money market? Money market was the short term market. A short term market, that is the money market, and over here you will have papers, commercial papers, certificate of deposit, repo, reverse repo. Features of this market is you are borrowing, lending for the short term, and the rates of interest are determined by open market factors. RBI etc. does not directly regulate this. Market participants are usually big banks, financial institutions etc. and short term instruments, usually less than 12 months. Next you have this concept of sustainable growth rate and internal growth rate. Sustainable growth rate, or G, is usually used simplistically says G is equal to R into B. But for this to be sustainable, a growth has to be financed by internal sources, that is without any additional financing like borrowing or equity fundraise. Are you still able to raise funds? Well, then it is sustainable if you are raising it through your own retained earnings. Are we clear with this? So it says sustainable growth rate is a measure of how a firm can grow even without borrowing more money. Even if I don't borrow more money, still how can I grow? That is sustainable growth rate. Repo and reverse repo are important tools in RBI to manage liquidity. Repo is a repurchase agreement, reverse repo is again the same. By and large what happens is, generally if market has a lot of liquidity, RBI can take certain, this is called as OMO, open market operations, where it can either sell its government bonds and suck out money, take money from the banks, or it will buy the government bonds from the bank and give money to the banks. So that provides liquidity in the market. Generally, as a student of economics, earlier you have two important ratios where RBI manages. One is a CRR, one is an SLR. So this is usually the rates, but then RBI actually uses a lot of open market operations whereby it keeps on buying and selling government bonds from banks and in huge quantities. That by, if I have sold bonds to the banks, banks must have purchased it, so the liquidity of the banks come to RBI, liquidity in the market reduces. Or if I want to pump in the liquidity, I will sell those bonds and then the banks will get the money which they can lend. Tools by the RBI to manage money supply. Why should the duration of a coupon carrying bond always be less than the time to maturity? Because duration is the amount where you expect to recover the cash flows. Beyond the total maturity, you are not going to recover any cash flows, and as a result, that is a maximum. But if your coupon is lower, you can always recover money earlier as well. Note on zero coupon bond. ये सब एकदम बेसिक स्टडी मटेरियल वाले क्वेश्चंस है. जीरो कूपन बॉन्ड यू कैन ऑलवेज राइट. दीज आर बॉन्ड्स which are issued at a huge discount, but they don't bear any coupon. That does not mean investor does not get any return. Investor does get any return, but that is in the form of discount. Are we clear with this? Okay. Next you have portfolio management, certain asset allocation strategies, integrated asset allocation. So under this strategy, capital market conditions and investor objectives are examined and allocation best serves the overall investor needs. Strategic, tactical, and in short there are just various names. So in strategic you have a broad strategy involving returns, risk and covariances, and you invest based on that only. Tactical asset management, risk tolerance is assumed and asset allocation is changed based on expectation. And in insured asset allocation, you change the portfolio wealth and move based on the risk taking ability. So there are 4 numbers or 4 values: integrated, strategic, tactical and insured asset allocations. Short note on stock lending scheme. Have you heard about this scheme before? What happens in case of an asset borrowing or lending mechanism or a stock lending mechanism? If you want to short a share, you can short a share, but if you don't have that share, you can borrow that share from someone, like you borrow money and give it. 3 months later, you can buy the share back and repay your borrowing. under stock lending scheme, obviously you will have to pay some charges, stock lending fees, but this kind of makes the market more efficient because the lenders get return, borrower use it to avoid settlement failure. It facilitates timely settlement and prohibits a fictitious bull run, because if the prices are overpriced, people can short it. Even if they don't have the shares, they can borrow the shares and short it. Okay, question 3. How is the stock market index calculated? Two important stock market indices can be Nifty as well as Sensex. How are they calculated? Now this is not going to come necessarily in the exam, but जो आप निफ्टी का नंबर देखते हो 25,000 और सेंसेक्स का नंबर देखते हैं close to maybe 82,000, how would that be calculated? We generally say it is a weighted average where the market capitalizations or sometimes the free float market capitalizations are taken as weights. So that is a weighted average price, yes. But remember that weighted average price is with respect to a base year. In your early economic days, you remember you studied national income, but national income also has a base year. So we are saying if the price was at a particular base year, at that base year prices change kitna ho raha hai, that is what we call as base year related national income. That is the same. काफी बच्चे बोलते हैं सर सेंसेक्स 80 के आसपास, निफ्टी ओनली 25 के आसपास. हाउ इज इट पॉसिबल? बिकॉज बेस इयर्स आर डिफरेंट. लाइक सेंसेक्स इज अ मच मोर ओल्डर इंडिकेटर. BSE is there since the 1800s. NSE तो 1990s या 2000 में ही आया हुआ है. So that why the base years might be different. एक जगह 30 stocks है, एक जगह 50 stocks है, but the base year is different and hence the prices can possibly be different. So over here you will identify the base year along with the basket of base shares, and the change in market price is calculated on a daily basis, and the shares are included which are regularly traded. In case the trading stops, then it gets excluded. And there are a few steps which they have given, where they say calculate the market capitalization, identify the base year and figure out that what is the change in the price vis-a-vis the base year. उतने से आपका index points में change होगा. Okay, what are P notes? Very interesting. Again, you will, and why is it a preferable route to invest for foreigners to invest in India? P notes, also called as participatory notes or sometimes called as promissory notes, are a very important. Again, ये अगर आपने सुना रहेगा तो आप solve कर पाओगे, otherwise it's very difficult that way. P note क्या होता है? An FII wants to invest in India. Can a foreigner invest in India directly? No. So they will have to again get registered with SEBI, etc. But then what used to happen is people used to say कि यार FII like Citibank etc. can get registered with SEBI. However, there may be, SEBI was earlier saying कि how will I know FII के पीछे कौन है? Very difficult to find, and hence they used to issue something called as participatory notes or P notes. And P note में क्या होगा? एन FII के अंदर FII जो रिटर्न कमाता है, अ पर्टिकुलर इन्वेस्टर विल पार्टिसिपेट, बट FII और SEBI विल नॉट नो हु द इन्वेस्टर इज. लेट्स से इन अंडरवर्ल्ड है, इफ अंडरवर्ल्ड वांट्स टू इन्वेस्ट मनी इन द स्टॉक एक्सचेंज, अंडरवर्ल्ड पैसा कैसे तो कमाता है, अभी उन्होंने दुबई में बैठ के पैसा कमाया, दे वांट टू इन्वेस्ट. इफ SEBI knows कि ये दाऊद का पैसा है, SEBI can block that money and उनको पैसा नहीं मिलेगा. So what they do is they kind of use this mechanism where they will give money to FIIs. FIIs say, I don't know, there are participatory note holders, whoever is holding, it's like a bearer check, whoever is holding, I will give them the return. I don't know who is holding. So SEBI ने, in my limited history that I remember, there is only once where market को डाउन सर्किट लगा है. मार्केट डाउन सर्किट समझते, ट्रेडिंग होल्ड्स, देयर आर वॉर्स दैट हैव हैपेंड, देयर हैव, मार्केट को डाउन सर्किट कभी नहीं लगा है. मार्केट को सर्किट लगा है 2 times when SEBI in 2007 or 8 had come up with a thing that I don't want investments through P notes. FIIs sold like mad because they said कि भाई P note का पैसा बंद, तो where will I get the money to invest? So my investors will need to encash the money, because SEBI, if they ask me that P note के पीछे कौन है, people said it was black money, right? Politician का भी पैसा हो सकता है, right? So it was crashes जहाँ पे Sensex, अभी आप आजकल देखते हो अरे इतना मार्केट गिरा, इतना गिरा, कितना गिरा होता है 1 और 2%, 1 और 2%, 80,000 पे if the market gives falls 2%, that is 1600 points. Sensex गिरा था 10% on the news of this was 2007-8, आप इवन सर्च भी कर सकते हो, पी नोट बैन से भी, तो वॉर बाद में this was the biggest trigger event. P notes SEBI said मेरे को नहीं चाहिए, then SEBI also had to fall back. They made more regulations but P notes are still there in India. So it is that big an instrument and वो जमाने में तो इतना SIP होता भी नहीं था, तो अपना मार्केट पूरा FII के पैसा से चलता था and FII said that I can't continue if P notes are not continuing. So it's a very important instrument. International access to capital markets, FII registered with SEBI. Other investors investing in India can open their account with registered FII, and FII itself will have a sub account through which it will trade. So foreign investors P note because they don't want to reveal their identities. They can invest in Indian shares without any formalities, etc. Are we clear with this? Okay, write any 4 differences between systematic and unsystematic. ये तो आपको आना चाहिए अभी. Systematic risk is the market related risk, cannot be diversified. Maybe factors like wars, banning P notes, these are systematic risk, affects all stock in the market. Whereas unsystematic risk is company or sector specific risk, can be diversified away. Maybe examples like death of CEO or something can be taken as unsystematic risk. Okay, beta is a measure for systematic, standard deviation is a measure for unsystematic. Explain the strategy of portfolio rebalancing, under which a value of a portfolio shall not be falling below the following in the normal. So we did a couple of strategies, if you remember, in mutual funds. One was a constant ratio plan where we were saying कि भाई 50-50 उसके नीचे नहीं जाना चाहिए, and second was CPPI. In CPPI we defined a floor value, if you remember, and then we said कि भाई floor value के नीचे नहीं जा सकता, so there are constant mix policy or CPPI. So things like this, as you see there is an overlap between practical and theory, systematic and unsystematic, CPPI constant ratio, वहाँ पे sums आए, यहाँ पे इसका possible theory भी आ सकता. Explain the key features of alternative investments that can make it them different from other investment avenues. आजकल इंडिया में बहुत चल रहा है AIF, सुना है अपन, alternative investment fund. So this can invest in alternatives. Have you guys ever invested in AIF? Ticket size बहुत high होता है, so it will not usually. So over here they will say कि भाई we will charge you a very high fee, but we will have a very specific strategy which is unique for you. Limited historical rate, I don't have as much historical pattern on this. These are features. Illiquidity, you don't have as much trading like mutual fund units can be traded. There is relatively less transparency, extensive research required, and they will do a lot of leveraged buying so that they can amplify your returns. Explain the advantages and limitations of capital asset pricing model. So we have studied CAPM on the numerical side, यहाँ पे उसका theory आता है. So it's a risk adjusted return, that is the advantages. Higher the beta, higher the risk, higher is the return. And it is useful to find the required rate of return. The limitations of CAPM would be reliability of beta, because it is not necessary market moves in tandem with beta. There can be other risks and information available. It's extremely difficult to get information on market portfolio, multiple risk free rates exist, multiple market indicators exist. That is kind of a possible drawback. Factors, ICI SM, yani when you see the study material at the end they give you certain questions. Inter CA maybe if you have seen the study material, last में theory questions they write, तो ये वो theory questions है basically. Short note on factors affecting decision of investment in fixed income securities: yield to maturity, what is your YTM, the possible risk of default, tax reduction, tax shield that I get, liquidity, how much buying selling is there on. So this is only for fixed income securities. Briefly explain the objectives of portfolio management. Your objective largely is maximize return at a given level of risk or minimize risk at a given level of return. But to achieve that, you will have to look at the various types of portfolio schemes. Like a debt scheme would need stability of income. An equity scheme may not even have stability of income. An equity scheme needs capital growth, debt scheme needs stability of income. Marketability, which security can be bought or sold. Maybe your scheme allows you to buy and sell only the large cap. अभी आजकल फ्लेक्सी कैप फंड बहुत चल रहा है. फ्लेक्सी कैप would mean that if the market is moving in a particular way, I will put in large cap. If it's moving in a particular, I will put in mid cap. So I'm not saying that I am only a mid cap or a large cap strategy, no, flexi cap type of a strategy. Liquidity, that is nearness to money. Diversification, favorable tax status, etc. Again, we have discussed CAPM, capital asset pricing model, in our core theory as well, and a few assumptions. So this is CAPM, RF plus RM minus RF into beta, and the assumptions we may not have discussed. As we said, William Sharpe expects the market to be efficient, rational investment goals, risk aversion, investors are risk averse, all assets are divisible, investors can borrow. Actually ये नहीं कर सकते अपन, ये जो पूरा पढ़ते हैं ना वो सब गलत है. It is in Indian situations, you can't borrow money in India for investing in shares or speculative purpose. आप बैंक के पास जाओगे, बैंक आपको पैसा ही नहीं देगा. अपन कल ही आर्बिट्रेज कुछ कर रहे थे, borrow money, अरे borrow money बैंक देगा ही नहीं, right? In India, you might have friends or relatives who might give you money. In India, RBI says you can't give money for investment in shares or speculative purpose. पैसा ही नहीं मिलेगा आपको उसके लिए. Are we getting? If you have money or you have people who can lend you money, बात अलग है. But again, we will assume, every economic theory assumes. आप खुद चाहो आप theory बना ही सकते हो. I am telling you, you assume 50 different things and say if 50 things happen, then this will happen. वो तो होना ही है, right? Okay. So that is, they assume that assets are divisible. You can borrow at a risk-free rate. You can borrow freely for capital markets. Securities can be exchanged without payment of brokerage, commissions, taxes, कुछ नहीं होगा. Okay, and markets are in equilibrium. So there are a few assumptions, 4 or 5 assumptions you should read. Markets are efficient, borrowing freely, capital markets are at equilibrium, all of that, 3 or 4 things you assume, and you can note down if an assumption is asked. Securitization we have done. Here you can build up trends, you can see questions like this. No. You can see questions, you can see multiple things asked in the same way. So that way आपको trend बनेगा. दूसरे chapters which we are studying right now, you will maximum see one or two. It is very difficult to build a trend कि हाँ यही type का question can possibly repeat. It's very difficult to build a trend. So when you do the theory, the 4 core theory chapters आपको proper audit जैसे पढ़ने, अच्छे से पढ़ने, उसमें से एग्जाम में क्वेश्चन आना ही आना है. आउट ऑफ द 4 or 5 क्वेश्चंस दैट विल कम, at least 2 to 3 are going to come from startup finance, securitization. तो वो आपको बराबर से आना चाहिए, बराबर से, with keywords, everything. The other things, if you don't study ना, trust में आपका confidence बहुत shaky रहता है till the exam. अभी तक हाँ बाद में, but on the exam day you will get so scared कि I've not studied. But even if you touch upon what is done over here, it is very highly likely that out of the 5 theory questions that will come, 2 or 3 almost certainly will come from startup finance, securitization, and वो यही material से आएंगे, almost guaranteed. The remaining 2 or 3 that are there, उसमें से भी 1 to 2 will almost always be repeated. और एक आध दो नया आ सकता है. अभी वो normal loss बोल के छोड़ देने का. If you still want to cover that, you go and open your study material. Start reading 2-3 pages, you will again come back and say कि नहीं वो तो नहीं हो पाएगा. तो study material is इतना theory, they have not given you in point form, they have given you entire paras and paras, वो याद ही नहीं रहेगा. तो it does not really make as much sense. If I were you, I would not have gone and read so much theory in the study material. Whatever is there is covered over here. थोड़ा भरोसा रखने का मेरे ऊपर and आगे जाने का, बराबर. So you have मेरे को ना ब्रेक में डर लग रहा था. So you have, people understand, right? You डर लग रहा है. So we'll do at least one more chapter and then we'll start. Probably we'll take a small break, right? So we will have, but we'll finish early only now, right? We'll finish early. Chalo, ब्रेक चाहिए? अभी चाहिए आपको? एक चैप्टर कर लेते हैं, उसके बाद कर लेते हैं. Explain the different methods for evaluating the performance of a mutual fund. So let us say we are doing mutual fund. See, there is a fair bit of theory in derivatives chapter, okay? इंस्टीट्यूट ने अच्छा खासा थियोरी और मीनिंगफुल थियोरी ऐड की है in the derivatives chapter and business valuation. Business valuation discussion we have already covered. We'll kind of briefly touch upon that again. But derivatives में they have kind of added quite a bit of theory. I'm trying to market. Right, okay. So they've added actually quite a bit of theory. Credit default swap, weather derivatives, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी डेरिवेटिव्स, इसके सबका थियरी है. बर्म्यूडा ऑप्शन, एशियन ऑप्शन, दिस ऑप्शन, दैट ऑप्शन. सो वील प्रोबेबली रिव्यू दैट ऑन द अदर साइड ऑफ द ब्रेक. सो यू विल हैव, लेट अस से, different mutual fund performance measures. You will have the Sharpe ratio. Sharpe ratio over here, we have studied is Rx minus Rf divided by standard deviation. Then you have Trenner ratio, you divide it by beta. And then the Jensen's alpha. Within Jensen's alpha, you would have the actual return minus the required return, and that would give you, let us say, the Jensen alpha. Concept of ETF. It's an interesting concept, exchange traded funds. So over here, it is kind of a overlay between an index fund and like a stock. So over here, ETF is a hybrid that combines features of an index mutual fund and a stock. Like an index mutual fund tracks a particular index, and a stock you can buy and sell. Like in India, gold ETF for example is very popular. If you want to buy gold rather than buying physical gold, you can go be commodity exchange पे तो gold buy करना यानी huge lot sizes and everything. So we want, let's say, to buy gold in paper form. So ETF will track gold. If gold goes up, उसका ETF भी बढ़ेगा. Gold goes down, ETF goes down, and that can, like a stock can be traded, ETF can also be traded. It is very popular for commodities, etc. So exchange traded funds, they are basically index funds. What do you mean by index funds? The feature is it will track the index. If gold goes up, this fund will go up. If gold goes down, this fund will go down. And at the same time, a stock can be traded and ETF can also be traded. Are we clear with this? In the same way as the stock is traded. Okay, now this is again a very different concept, side pocketing. Now what is side pocketing over here? Mutual funds are allowed now to make schemes where they can create what we call as a side pocket and transfer their risky assets or certain assets into a, जैसे कंपनी कैसे demerge कर सकता है, in a similar way mutual fund can transfer some of its specific assets into a separate scheme or a side pocket that they will have. So in simple words, side pocketing in mutual fund refers to separation of risky assets from other investments and cash holdings. The purpose is to make sure that the money invested in a mutual fund which is linked to stressed assets gets locked until the fund recovers the money from the company. That could avoid the distress of selling illiquid assets. So you will remove that and put it in what we call as a side pocket, and that is kept separate as compared to your regular liquid assets. So they create a separate side pocket for stressed assets. Are we clear with this? Okay. Side pocketing is quite common internationally. However, side pocketing has been resorted to kind of manipulate the investors as well. So India में इतना popular नहीं है because SEBI is not very much in favor, but nevertheless there are a lot of regulations which are governing this. Money market mutual fund, again this is a mutual fund which tracks the money market. Earlier we discussed the features of money market. However, if it's a money market mutual fund, it is a mutual fund which tracks the money market, like government securities, commercial paper, certificate of deposit. You will invest in a money market mutual fund, usually helpful if you need quick liquid money, but you don't want to invest directly in the money market instrument. Okay. Explain about direct plan. Now what does a direct plan mean? Earlier, if you had to buy a plan, you had to buy it through a distributor only. Like there were a lot of distributors like blue chip securities, and आपको उसके through ही buy करना होता है. तो like cars today, you can't buy cars directly. You have to go to a dealer and you have to buy from the dealer only. अपन बोले dealer तो यार पैसा कमाता होगा, टेक्निकली अगर गाड़ी लेना है, आई नो दैट पुणे के बाजू में चकान करके जगह है, almost every big automotive manufacturer has a plant in Chakan, almost everyone. So I will say कि एक काम करते, एक चकान का ट्रिप मार के आते एंड फैक्ट्री से ही गाड़ी खरीद के आते. कैन यू बाय अ कार फ्रॉम द मारुति फैक्ट्री? डीलरशिप अग्रीमेंट्स आर सच दैट द फैक्ट्री, द मैन्युफैक्चरर कैन नेवर सेल डायरेक्टली. ये सब जो शोरूम होता है वो ऑलमोस्ट कोई भी शोरूम कार वाले के नहीं है. दे आर ऑल लाइक टोयोटा हैज लकोजी टोयोटा. They are actually distributors to whom the companies will pay, let us say, commission. ऐसे ही म्यूचुअल फंड में हुआ करता था. I cannot go directly to a mutual fund and take the scheme. I have to go it. I have to do it through a distributor. Now, eventually पहले कैपिटल मार्केट डेवलप करने के लिए जरूरी थे. Now we are evolving. So SEBI has said that you can have two separate plans. A mutual fund can have two separate plans. One is a plan which is a direct plan जहाँ पे distributor का रोल ही नहीं है. One is a plan which is distributed through the distributor. Like it's not a direct comparable, but I'm not sure whether you have seen. आप कितनी बार फोन खरीदने जाते हो? You see Amazon पे Samsung का एक मॉडल दिखता है. अपन क्या करते हैं? You see the model, but they don't allow you to use it. तो अपन क्रोमा में जाते हैं and we try to check it and then कुछ तो बहाना करके निकल जाते हैं. Right, but then distributor said कि ये तो गलत हो रहा है यार, and hence Samsung and all of these people kind of they have different models at a lot of places. छोटे छोटे जो levels पे है, so they will have a different model which is online exclusive, a different model which is offline. By and large feature same होगा, but a layman would be a little confused कि यार ये model अलग है, ये model का number अलग है, so there is something different, and hence there is a different plan which or a different model which is sold through the distributor, a different model which is sold directly. So mutual fund में भी ऐसा है. Now there are direct plans as well as distributor plans. Historically direct plans are giving relatively more return because खर्चा relatively कम है. So over here mutual funds direct plans are where asset management companies do not charge distributor expenses, trail fees or transaction charges. They will directly give this to, let us say, the investor. Explain how to establish a mutual fund. This is a pure theory thing. In case of a mutual fund, it is basically a fund. Fund एक trust जैसा बनता है. Trust is a separate institution, a legal entity where money is collected from a pool of investors. That money will be managed by an AMC. AMC is a separate company, asset management company. That money will be managed by an asset management company. Usually वो sponsor जो होता है उसका ही एक separate group entity होता है. Like if Reliance is sponsoring a fund that is creating a trust, creating a fund, it will have its asset management company who will manage that fund. But in order to ensure that the fund is managed as per the instructions, there will be a group of trustees who will regularly ensure that the fund is being managed in a way it was originally envisaged as per the charter documents. So over here you will have a sponsor like let's say Reliance who appoints trustees. There is a mutual fund trust that is getting created. There is an AMC asset management company who will manage this money which is received from the investors and which is deployed in the market of assets. So basically a few things. There will be a sponsor who will create a trust. In that money will be raised from the investors and that money will be invested in a market by an asset management company which is again appointed by the sponsor, and there will be a board of trustees who will ensure that the funds are managed in a way that they were originally envisaged. Are we clear with this? Okay. Distinguish between open-ended and close-ended schemes. So open-ended schemes are open for entry and exit wherever the investor wants. Close-ended schemes can be invested directly at the time of the NFO, new fund offer. Later they can be traded on the exchange. Describe the word tracking error. Now this is a little interesting. Tracking error सुनने में अपने को difficult लगता है. Tracking error is nothing but standard deviation, but in a very typical way. Like, have you heard about index funds? What do index funds do? They track the index. Track the index बोले तो if Nifty में 50 stock है, I will track the movement of Nifty. So ideally what should I do? Ideally, what should I do? I should buy those 50 stocks in the same proportion. Most of the index funds don't do that. They will say कि यार टेक्नोलॉजी के 10 शेयर और 5 शेयर्स है इन द इंडेक्स. For me to manage and everything 5 shares, I can say TCS represents technology. It is there in the index. So TCS Infosys दो ही लेते नहीं. इंडेक्स में तो और भी है. इंडेक्स में विप्रो इज देयर. इंडेक्स में फॉर एग्जांपल हैप्पीएस्ट माइंड करके एक कंपनी है, दैट इज ऑल्सो देयर. तो यार हर एक क्या लेने का जरूरत है यार. आई हैव टू मैनेज सो मेनी थिंग्स. कुछ ना कुछ चेंज होगा एवरी टाइम. एक एक स्टॉक बाय सेल क्यों करना है? बाय एंड लार्ज इफ टेक इज गोइंग अप, ऑल HCL है ऑन द इंडेक्स, we'll say Infosys TCS represents that. Acha, so my movement will be similar to market movement, not exactly the same as market movement. There might be some fund जिसने exactly 50 के 50 डाले तो ट्रैकिंग एरर ऑलमोस्ट 0 निकलेगा. बट कोई फंड है वो बोल रहा है इंडेक्स फंड है, बट वो बोल रहा है कि यार देर आर 10 सेक्टर्स, हर एक सेक्टर के मैं दो दो जन पिकअप कर लूंगा. नाउ देयर इज बर्जर पेंट्स एंड एशियन पेंट्स, दोनों है. मैंने बोला पेंट तो पेंट है. And as a result, if Asian Paints is doing well, paints industry, आज देखो पेंट इंडस्ट्री में प्रॉब्लम चल रहा है. क्यों? पेंट इंडस्ट्री का ऑयल पेंट आता है ना. क्रूड ऑयल इज द बिगेस्ट इंग्रेडिएंट. इफ देयर इज अ वॉर इन द मिडल ईस्ट, क्रूड ऑयल बिकम्स एक्सपेंसिव. मेरे को मेरा पेंट महंगा, इनपुट्स बढ़ जाएगा, कॉस्ट बिकम्स वेरी कॉस्टली. सो दैट वेज ओवर हियर दैट रिस्क इज देयर फॉर एवरीवन इन पेंट्स. So there will be a tracking error. Tracking error समझे standard deviation. There will be a deviation in your return as compared to the market, the return of the index that you are tracking. The lesser the tracking error, the more real index fund you are. The more the tracking error, the less exact index fund you are. Are we clear with this? So over here, explain how to measure the divergence or deviation of a mutual fund scheme that replicates any benchmark or index. So over here you can see this is tracking error. It is nothing but standard deviation. यहाँ पे n-1 आप हटा दो, वो theory में भले लिखा हुआ है. Remember in your 11th 12th you might have studied in statistics कि when the sample set is small, rather than taking n you take n-1. सुना अपने कभी किया? Statistical principle है, we never apply this because आपको थोड़ी ना 3000 ऑब्जर्वेशन कोई देने वाला है. आपको तो 5, 10, 20 ऑब्जर्वेशन ही दिया रहेगा. एंड दैट वेज यू डोंट टेक n-1 इन जनरल, यू टेक n ओनली. प्रैक्टिकली इफ द सैंपल साइज इज स्मॉल, सैम्पलिंग थ्योरी सेज n-1 इज बेटर देन टेकिंग n. बट अपने वो नहीं करते, अपन हमेशा n ही उठाते, तो वी विल टेक n ओनली. इंडेक्स फंड्स is one of the special funds. What are other special funds? Index fund is one of the type of funds. Other funds are international funds. Now Indian people want to invest in international markets. So there are a lot of funds given by पराग पारिक करके एक फंड मैनेजर है. उनका बहुत ही पॉपुलर फंड है जो यूएस वाला फंड है. मोतीलाल ओसवाल ने भी एक फंड चालू किया. इफ आई वांट टू इन्वेस्ट इन यूएस, आई कैन नॉट डायरेक्टली इन्वेस्ट इन द यूएस मार्केट. These guys will invest, so they will make an international fund where they will invest in the US market. You invest in their fund. पराग पारिक का तो काफी पॉपुलर फंड है, which is a international US based fund. Offshore funds, they are funds located in India to raise money globally for investors. Sector funds, ये काफी thematic funds बहुत चले थे. Thematic funds would mean बीच में defense sector बहुत चल रहा था. So people said, let me make a fund which is unique to defense only. A few top defense company, Hindustan Aeronautics, MTAR Technology, Mazgaon, ये थोड़े हमने जो top companies है वो identify कर लिया and we will invest in this. So that is sector, thematic fund. Money market funds, as we said, they will invest in government securities, treasury bill, etc. Fund of funds. अभी ये interesting है. What is fund of funds? अभी आज के तारीख में सबसे ज्यादा आपको See, you are now at a time जहां पे आपके पास options इतने सारे हैं. In general, everywhere. The biggest confusion is where do I? आप कुछ भी करो ना, आपके पास options ही options हैं. अभी OTT content भी देखो. You start with it and then आप वही ढूंढते कि मैं देखूं क्या यार. Other time तो उसमें ही निकल जाता है because you have so many options. So everywhere you have this problem. So अभी funds भी if you go to see, you will be intimidated by इतने सारे funds. किधर इन्वेस्ट करूं एंड यू विल काइंड ऑफ अगेन गो बैक, यार चल बाद में देखता हूं. आई सिलेक्ट, आई आस्क समवन व्हिच इज अ गुड फंड. सो फंड ऑफ फंड सेज कि मैं एक काम करूंगा, तू मेरे में पैसा डाल, आई विल पुट इन ऑलमोस्ट ऑल फंड्स. सो दैट वेज यू डोंट हैव टू वरी अबाउट फंड. आई विल सिलेक्ट द फंड माई वे, और इफ देयर आर 50 टॉप फंड्स, आई विल पुट मनी इन द 50 टॉप फंड्स. तो आपका पैसा ऑटोमेटिकली उधर चलेगा. सो फंड ऑफ फंड्स विल बी अ फंड विच विल इन्वेस्ट इन द फंड्स. यू थिंक इट इज वेरी पॉपुलर? आई मीन कॉन्सेप्ट ठीक है, बट ये सब म्यूचुअल फंड्स सफर अ लॉट. आज के तारीख में SIP के एंड मार्केट इज गोइंग टू बी डूइंग गुड इन म्यूचुअल फंड्स, बट म्यूचुअल फंड में सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है कॉस्ट. फॉर यू म्यूचुअल फंड मैनेजर्स आर वेरी हाईली पेड. अच्छे एकदम मस्त ऑफिस में बैठते हैं, वेरी हाईली पेड, कॉस्ट बहुत लगता है. सो एक तो म्यूचुअल फंड पहले कॉस्ट लगा रहा है, यू आर पुटिंग फंड ऑफ फंड, वो वापस कॉस्ट लगाएगा. सो दैट मीन्स आपके हाथ में ज्यादा बचता नहीं है. नाउ मार्केट इज मूविंग इन वन डायरेक्शन, तो हाथ में बच रहा है. बट इफ द मार्केट वॉज नॉट मूविंग एज मच, यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू मेक एज मच रिटर्न यार. तो आप बोलोगे इतना करके FD जितना ही पैसा कमाए या उससे भी कम कमाए. आर वी गेटिंग दिस? सो फंड ऑफ फंड्स, द कॉस्ट इज अ बिग प्रॉब्लम ओवर देयर. अदरवाइज फंडामेंटली इट्स अ गुड scheme to be. And capital protection oriented funds, this will be schemes where your capital protection is guaranteed. I'll say कि इतना तू दे रहा तो इतना तेरे को मिलेगा, and after that, beyond that, I will deploy in certain strategies. Gold funds, as Indians, we are very bullish in general regarding gold. And आज की तारीख में आप गोल्ड देखो एक अलग ही जोन में चल रहा है. It's close to 80,000. It's competing with the Sensex right now. So that ways you want to invest in gold, but again gold is so expensive. आपको 1 ग्राम लेने के लिए 8,000 रुपया भरना पड़ेगा, और 1 ग्राम कुछ आएगा भी नहीं हाथ में. So you can have funds which will invest. It's like gold ETF only for all practical purposes, which will index in gold. Yes, okay. And quant funds, as we discussed earlier, they will use certain rules. Data driven approach for stock selection. So यहाँ पे 5-6 again this is a very important hack. Okay, people use this in BCom. अगर आपको points है, it is always preferable instead of 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 लिखने का ABCDEFGH, because बीच में आप कुछ गुप्चा दोगे. अगर आपने 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 गुप्चा है तो दिख जाता है कि 8 आपने लिख दिया, बट ABCDEF G खा गए, H डायरेक्ट लिखा तो पर्सन वुड से हाँ H यानी कितने पॉइंट्स, अच्छा इतने पॉइंट्स लिखे होंगे. इज व्हाट पीपल से. इट वाज अ वेरी, हमको ये TY में सिखाया गया था दैट इफ यू हैव टू राइट मोर पॉइंट्स ऑलवेज यूज अल्फाबेट्स इफ यू डोंट रिमेंबर ऑल द पॉइंट्स. और बीच में एक आध अल्फाबेट गुप्चा जाने का, किसको पता है G के बाद H आने वाला है, आप I डायरेक्ट लिख लो. राइट, सो दैट इज द थॉट प्रोसेस. राइट, सो ओवर हियर देयर आर सो मेनी पॉइंट्स. You can remember 4-5 of them: special funds, maybe international funds, offshore funds, fund of funds, gold funds, index, quant fund, etc. These are different types of funds. Exam question है देखो. But usually ये questions you will have a broad idea, but you will not have consistently one question asking 5 times. लाइक सिक्योरिटाइजेशन में होता है, स्टार्टअप फाइनेंस में होता है. यहाँ पे एक आध 2 बार एक, बट कौन सा आएगा पता नहीं है. सो वी काइंड ऑफ डू ऑल द पास्ट क्वेश्चंस. व्हाट आर द एडवांटेजेस ऑफ इन्वेस्टिंग इन म्यूचुअल फंड्स? यहाँ पे आप अच्छा खासा काम पे लग जाएगा. यू सी सो मेनी एडवांटेजेस. इतने 4 मार्क के लिए लिखना ही नहीं है. आई मीन यू कैन राइट ऑन योर ओन दैट यू हैव प्रोफेशनल मैनेजमेंट, डाइवर्सिफिकेशन, यू कैन इन्वेस्ट इन अ पूल ऑफ सिक्योरिटीज, लिक्विडिटी, ट्रांसपेरेंसी, कन्वीनियंस, flexibility. You can easily remove money whenever you want to. So maybe 4-5 points to remember and you are good to go. Then you have explained the financial measures that help in the evaluation or performance of a mutual fund. So you have expense ratio where you measure the expenses. Lower the expenses, the better you think. Sharp ratio, trainer ratio we have discussed, and there was a ratio we discussed about Sortino earlier if you remember. Sortino is the same as Sharp or trainer. सिर्फ डिनोमिनेटर में rather than taking standard deviation you take downside deviation, and downside deviation if any will be given to you in the question. Are we clear with this? Achha, now before we stop for a break and go, let us say, to derivatives on the other side, at the end of your shield we have added some section regarding new theory added. Now this is not something which institute has asked. So what we have tried to do is we have tried to cover everything. So the way this shield works is, or this compiler works is, you have your question bank which is from RTPs, MTPs, practice manual, exam questions fully updated. So that is your set of questions including institute study material में जो questions है. But there is some theory which is newly added in the study material, and there is some theory which they can possibly ask, but they have not asked. So इसका कोई question आया नहीं है नहीं. But I want you to have a broad idea, because question भले RTP MTP में आया नहीं, main exam में आ ही सकता है. Like unicorn में ऐसा हुआ था. We had put unicorn somewhere behind because there was no question on unicorn, और unicorn अभी recently exam में भी आ गया. So that ways there may be some things that you should just glance through, have a broad idea. ये आपके study material पे है. So what I think you are on page what 243 के आसपास. So there are certain concepts 243 246 or something where they have given you theory, but इसका कोई corresponding question बना नहीं है. Like in security valuation you have responsibility and roles of valuers. आजकल उसमें बहुत study material में डाल दिया. So when you look at valuers, like maybe if you are working in a valuation firm, your principal or your partners may be registered valuers. So if you are a registered valuer, you can do SEBI approved valuation, you can give certificates. Maybe net worth का certificate चाहिए, so maybe you need to be a registered valuer. RBI might need valuation to be done by registered valuers. So maybe they are saying what is the role of a valuer. It is helpful for mergers, acquisition or takeover, maybe in slum sale or asset sale, conversion of debt, capital reduction. For all of these places you will need a valuer certificate. पहले सिर्फ एक CA का certificate लगता था. Now it is not just necessarily be, now they are diluting the roles of a CA. अभी कुछ बात चल रहा है what CA can do. Even a CA में they are saying we will allow. CA में कुछ they are saying, so similarly they have said कि यार CA बहुत पैसे चार्ज कर रहे हैं सर्टिफिकेट के. If a certificate has to be given up, if a person who knows how to do basic valuation has passed the valuation का कुछ एक एग्जाम होता है and आप भी easily clear कर सकते हो, right? You can also easily clear that valuation exam and you can become a registered valuer. If you remember, I don't know, in capital gains in income tax, remember sometimes if you have to do some valuation, they say valuation done by a registered valuer. So ऐसे registered valuer है this time around for stocks. Responsibilities of value, पूरा time pass है. Integrity and fairness, professional competence and due care, independence and disclosure of interest, confidentiality, information management. So you should these are ethics. So अगर आपने ethics वगैरह देखा है, competence, you should have integrity. So these are basic things. Gifts and hospitality जो नहीं लेना चाहिए, right? Okay, if someone gives you, वैसे आपको कोई देने वाला है नहीं, but अगर दे रहा है तो भी आपको बोलना है कि हम लेने नहीं वाले. So remuneration and cost, occupation. So there are 20-30 points. अगर आपको कभी नींद आ रहा है, यानी सोना है but नींद नहीं आ रहा है, right? You come to this, try to read. Guarantee आप 29 तक पहुंच ही नहीं पाओगे, right? उसके पहले आपको नींद आना ही आना है, surely, right? Okay. So these are various things. I mean, it's there in your study mat. Basic broad pointers you should be aware just in case it comes at what is a valuer, what are the roles and responsibilities. Precautions to be taken by a valuer before accepting any valuation assignment. You don't provide a precise estimate of value. You can always give a range of values. Valuing is more than just evaluating financial statements. You can also look at the other things beyond financial statements. Investors tend to focus either on numbers or story without attempt to reach a middle ground. While it is true that robust intrinsic value is an error-free model makes investing more technical subject, in reality emotions play a massive role in moving stocks either higher or lower. So you see a lot of people आज की तारीख में वो courses कर रहे हैं, बाकायदा courses कर रहे हैं for storytelling. They are saying कि एक चीज होता है कि आपने एक अच्छा business बनाया, but the way you enumerate that story of your business is much more likely to give you funding as opposed to having just a sound business. So storytelling पे लोग अभी बाकायदा courses कर रहे हैं, right? Next you have portfolio management. There is a separate section on investment in gold, and in gold you have something called as gold bars, where the most traditional way is you can go to a jeweler and buy a gold bar. बार तो बहुत दूर का बात होता है, बार आता है मिनिमम 100 ग्राम का, and 100 grams gold is close to I think 8 lakh rupees एक इतने से बार का. तो you can always have gold coins or gold something. Sovereign bonds was a very popular model. अभी आजकल गवर्नमेंट काफी टाइम से इश्यू नहीं कर रहा है, but a sovereign bond is what? It was a very good thought. The government said India में a lot of money lies unproductive. How does it lie unproductive? In the bank, in your lockers, in the form of gold. ऐसे ही पड़ा हुआ है. The money, if it enters into banking channels, so credit creation cycle में जा सकता. So it was very difficult to break the Indian psyche towards gold safety. So they said एक काम करते हैं, we will try to make them shift from gold. So we will give them the guarantee of gold, but in the form of paper, and वो sovereign यानी government back करता है. So what will happen if you invest in a gold bond when the gold was 50,000 rupees, and if the gold matures, and it becomes 80,000 rupees at that point, then you will get 80,000 back along with the 2.5% interest जो आपको बैंक के लॉकर में नहीं मिलने वाला है. And hence people said कि एक काम करते, rather than investing in gold, you should invest in sovereign gold bonds. A lot of people, a lot of influencers had also said that sovereign gold bonds is a good product to invest. So this is now a different product because आपको gold का return तो मिलना ही है, but साथ में 2.5% interest भी मिलेगा. The only problem of this bond, only problem if you are thinking of investing, it's a good bond. If I had to invest, I would invest in sovereign gold bond. But the only problem here is अगर आपको time period के पहले उसको निकलना है उसके बाद, because sovereign gold bond will have a time frame, then उसका market है नहीं. So people buying selling में आपको मिलेंगे नहीं, and hence if you have to sell at a much lower price. ये gold, physical gold में क्या होता है, if you need money, ये sovereign gold bond 10 years. If you wait for 10 years, perfect, you will get 2.5% every year, and at the end you will actually get the gold. But what if you want to exit in the middle? Then you can sell the bond technically, but अगर buyer ही नहीं है, if you go to sell, there is no buyer, then आपको discount देना ही पड़ेगा, and someone will not buy ऐसे. So वो एक practical problem है. The market is not deep, it does not have as much trading. Sovereign gold bond. Then you have gold traded funds, which we just studied, exchange traded funds, and e-gold. So this is provided by the National Spot Exchange. This is again you set up a trading account and उसके अंदर आपको gold मिलता जाएगा. It is like e-gold, not a unit, gold in e-form. That's it. Are we clear with this? So these are 4 products: gold bars, sovereign gold bonds, gold funds like exchange traded funds, or e-gold. Securitization we have discussed earlier. Then last we have mutual funds. We'll review that and then we'll go for a small break, and then on the other side do the remaining chapters: derivatives, forex, mergers वगैरह. We are almost halfway there, or more than halfway there, before आप इतने बड़े बड़े आँख करके देखो, right? Okay, so over here evaluation of mutual funds. We have said evaluation done using various qualitative or quantitative parameters. Quantitative आसान है, risk adjusted returns, benchmark returns, comparison to peers, returns across market cycles. So you will compare this, adjusting for risk. Sharpe ratio, Treynor ratio क्या है? Risk adjusted returns. You have adjusted for risk and then figured out how much is your reward. Or Jensen's alpha, excess over the risk. Comparison with peers or benchmarks. So over here, how well are you performing vis-a-vis your peer or vis-a-vis the benchmark that you are tracking? Comparison across different market cycles, etc. And financial measures. Qualitative parameters, you look at the quality of the portfolio, track record and competence of the fund manager, and credibility of the fund house. So this Sharpe ratio, Treynor ratio just give you quantitative, but qualitatively you want to see that who is a better fund manager, who has had a good enough track record, what are the quality of stocks, are they manipulative in nature. There are some, जैसे कोई CA भी होता है ना, वो आपको पता रहता है ये तो जुगाड़ू है, ये सेटिंग करने में होशियार है, but some CAs are very, वो ओपिनियन और वगैरह. सो यू विल हैव, दैट इज अ वेरी क्वालिटेटिव असेसमेंट. एक बंदा है जो काम करवा के देगा कैसे भी, एक बंदा है जो मे बी अलग तरीके से. सो दैट इज अ क्वालिटेटिव असेसमेंट व्हेन यू आर फाइंडिंग योर CA. यहाँ पे इन केस ऑफ अ फंड मैनेजर, रोल ऑफ अ फंड मैनेजर, वेल ही इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट. It's like a gatekeeper of the funds and who will decide where the funds have to be invested. There are 2 types of funds, actively or passively managed funds. Actively managed funds would be, I will actively try to buy stocks which I think are going to go up, actively try to sell stocks which are bad. In passive funds, I will sit back and relax, I will track an index or something. So passive funds. So over here, Then there are certain roles of the fund manager which can include compliances, constant monitoring, creation of wealth, control over works outsourced to third party. A lot of your industrial training happens over here. When you do, you will find a lot of people recruiting you for valuation purpose. ये third party valuation people हो गए, Dun and Bradstreet वगैरह, they will say that what we will do is we are valuing at each quarter or each half yearly end based on PE, VC or mutual funds. So हमें regular valuation करना. So I have outsourced work to third parties. I have to see that these third parties whom I outsource are properly following procedures or not. Role of FIIs, foreign institutional investors. Now FIIs are also allowed to invest in Indian mutual funds. So there will be enhanced corporate governance because FIIs, unlike a small individual, will demand good governance, improved competition in the market, improved inflow of capital in the economy. Are we clear with this? So these are a few questions or few points. We'll stop for a breather and then on the other side we will go towards derivatives. Okay? Shalom. We'll go to the remaining few chapters. We'll go to derivatives. Over here we will do the regular theory from our compiler, but we'll also pick up a few new silence please. We'll also pick up a few new theory concepts that have been added, and we will do that right now, for which institute has added in the new study material. So when we look at derivatives, first you have the concept of embedded derivatives. Now derivatives, we are aware. What is derivatives? It derives value from an underlying. Silence please. Then amount paid initially is nil or insignificant and settlement happens at a future date. Now an embedded derivative is a derivative which is embedded, stitched into, built inside a host contract. So that is called as an embedded derivative. Are we clear with this? So this is what we say which is meant by an embedded derivative. It is something which is inbuilt into a host contract. So the embedded derivative concept would involve a derivative which is embedded like a convertible debenture. In case of a convertible debenture, there is an option to convert and that option to convert is embedded inside the main host contract. So over here, that is regarding embedded, it is a derivative which is embedded, built inside another host contract like a convertible debenture has a derivative which is embedded inside, the option to convert is embedded inside. Okay, distinguish between future and option. Now this is a very basic distinction. In future you have the right and obligation both, whereas when it comes to an option you only have a right, you have no obligation. In case of a future you have to pay margin, in option you don't have to pay any margin. In futures there is no premium, but in option there is a premium. Are we clear with this? So these can be the notable differences. In terms of strategies, you see there is a strategy. You remember straddle and strangle. Straddle is what? One call, one put at same exercise price. Strangle is what? One call, one put at different exercise prices or different expiry. Usually both of these strategies are confused, combination strategies where you don't know whether the price will go up or go down and hence you buy both the call and the put. Strangle, you buy it at different exercise prices to probably ensure that your transaction cost is to some extent minimized. 4. Explain cash settlement and physical settlement in derivatives contract and the relative advantages and disadvantages. Cash settlement means net settlement, whereas physical settlement means gross settlement. So when we look at cash settlement, that is net settlement, you settle through differences in prices. So if you are settling through differences in prices, whatever is the net gain or loss is automatically hedged, managed. However, if you want the underlying item as well, you will have to go back to the spot market and buy or sell the underlying item. But in physical settlement, you will get that underlying item, but you have to pay or receive the entire amount. But if I don't want the physical item, then I'll have to again go back and sell in the market. Are we clear with this? So gross settlement, net settlement, we call it, यहाँ पे बोला गया है physical settlement, that is gross, or net settlement, that is cash. Are we clear with this? Okay, next you have a concept of marking to market. Have you heard about these words? That means usually in case of a futures contract, you mark the contract at the end of the day as if it settles at the day's closing price. If you have bought earlier, you settle by selling. If you have sold earlier, you settle by buying. That is marking to market, and whatever is a gain or loss, gain will be recovered, loss will be paid off. Are we clear with this? Okay. Next you have 4 assumptions of Black-Scholes model. Now this is again like a model that will be used for the purpose of pricing option contracts. Here they are not asking you to find the formula. Here they are just saying that you will take an assumption. So assumption over here is generally we assume for options we take European options. American options are usually not taken unless otherwise given we take European options. A very standard assumption across the board, not just over here, whether it is CAPM, purchasing power parity theory, everywhere we assume there is no transaction cost. So there is no transaction cost. Short-term interest rates are known, are constant, stocks don't pay dividend, price movements are similar to random walk, they can move in any way, and the returns are normally distributed. And the variance of return is constant over the life of the option. Variance. Remember for Black-Scholes we had said that how will we know that we have to do Black-Scholes? There will be standard deviation or variance given to us. So that variance will be necessary in case of a Black-Scholes question. Explain the difference between forward and future. Earlier we discussed the difference between forward and future and option. Now this is forward and future. Forward is customized, future is standardized. Forward has no lot size, no expiry date, future has that. But forward has no liquidity, future has liquidity. Forward, you are bearing the risk of the counterparty. In futures, the exchange is a counterparty and hence you are not bearing the risk. Further, you have margin in case of a future. Forward usually does not come with a margin. Are we clear with this? Okay. Next, commodity swaps have some peculiarities. So over here, when you look at commodity swaps, have we done swaps? Maybe currency, maybe interest rate, commodity के लिए भी swap or exchange can happen. The peculiarity over here is dependent on the structure of the commodity in question. So different, it's not as standardized as कि भाई loan ले लिया और loan दे दिया. You have to look at the nature of the commodity, the type of the commodity, so the structure of the particular commodity should be looked at. The liquidity of the underlying commodity market, seasonality has to be seen when that swap is entered because different seasons have different. Share में ऐसा नहीं होता ना, season wise थोड़ी ना होता है, but in commodity there is seasons which will affect brokerage etc. will have to be seen. So these are certain features of a commodity swap. Then explain the necessary condition of a commodity derivatives. So commodity derivatives regular to a usual to a regular derivative only. Commodity should be durable and it should be possible to store. Let us say you enter into a banana futures contract. Now for that banana does not have a life of 3, 4, 6 months, right? So अभी यहाँ पे for you to have that commodity may not necessarily be stored, right? Units must be homogeneous, otherwise quality में problem आ सकता है. Share में क्या, if there are 1 lakh shares, every share is same. But you have 1 lakh units of a commodity, different units of commodity, like let's say edible food products, different apples have different values, right? Commodity must be subjected to frequent price fluctuation and there must be sufficiently large demand and supply. Supply flow must flow naturally to the market and there must be breakdown of an existing pattern. So there should be enough quantity, demand and supply. Investing in stock futures differs from investing in equity options in several ways. Now to be honest, this is nothing but the difference between futures and options. They say that they are saying that it differs in various ways. Why? एक जगह पे premium होगा, one place premium will not be there. At one of the places there would be, let us say, margin, other places it would not be there. At one place you have the right and obligation both, in other place you only have the right, no obligation per se. So as nature, options you have the right but not the obligation. In futures, investor is also obliged. Price of investing, they have to pay premium. In futures you don't have to pay premium, something like that. You can note down a few points. Briefly explain the various factors that affect the value of an option. Remember, value of an option, spot, most important factor. As the spot price changes, value of the option changes. Apart from that, the time to expiry, the longer the expiry, more is the volatility, more is like if I have an option period for 2 years, with 2 साल में क्या change होगा पता नहीं, as compared to 2 months which is fairly nearby. So the value of the option depends on the time, it depends on the spot at expiry, it depends on the rate of interest, it also depends on volatility, the standard deviation. The more the volatile the stock, more will be the premium. Are we clear with this? So price movement, time till expiry, volatility of prices, interest rates, etc. Investors can use stock index futures to perform various stocks. Index futures, so it's just a short note on index futures. You can use index futures for the purpose of hedging. You can use index futures to profit from a change in your expected price. So stock future, use index futures to change the weights of their investment portfolio. Like we did sums where your beta was close to 1.4, you want to bring it down to 0.95. You can possibly use index futures for that. Stock futures allow investor to separate market timing from market selection. So you don't have to select the stock futures. Index futures you can take on Nifty, and Nifty does not involve any selection on your side. You can make money from stock index futures through index arbitrage, also refers to as program trading. Index futures is used to hedge the value of the portfolio. So these are various reasons why I can possibly use the index futures. There is some flexibility over here. There are possibilities of speculative gains. Maintain one stock portfolio during stock market corrections. And one of the major advantages of futures market is that one can sell contracts as readily as one can buy them. So that is liquidity. In case of index futures is relatively high as compared to the stock futures. Now there are two concepts which have come in the November 23 paper, that is linked to option Greeks that you will do. Option Greeks are various types. As we had discussed earlier, delta, gamma, vega, theta, rho. So a Greek is very similar to the sensitivity, like share mein we said beta, wo bhi ek Greek hota hai. How much will your share move in response to the market movement, that is measured by beta. In a similar way, option ka premium will move by how much? But by in response to what? Vega measures the responsiveness of movement in the option premium vis-a-vis the volatility. V for Vega, V for volatility. Rho measures the movement in the options premium in response to the change of interest rate. Rho, R for rate of interest. Whereas T for theta, T for time, you will study in option Greeks. Vega measures how much your option premium will change if the volatility changes. Sir, can the volatility change? Yes. Adani mein, let's say there was a 15% standard deviation, then Hindenburg ka report aa gaya. It becomes very volatile, becomes a 20-25% standard deviation, in which case volatility changes, so premium bhi change hoga, but by how much will it change? It will be measured by Vega. Rate of interest, you find the premium as present value, but if rate of interest changes, your present value will change. So kitne se aapka premium change hoga, that is called as rho. Okay, next you have the next question. While securitization, there's a separate chapter on securitization. The securities issued by the SPV are backed by loans. The CDO is what? Collateralized debt obligation. We will study this in credit derivatives, within derivatives only. Collateralized debt obligations is backed by pool of bonds or asset-backed securities. REITs are real estate investment trust and other CDOs. So what they are trying to say is, when I do typical securitization for the trust or the SPV, my underlying is, let us say, for the trust or the SPV, let us say my underlying is the portfolio itself, the loans. But in case of, let us say, a CDO, the underlying can be bonds, it can be REITs, it can be something else. What are the main types of risk associated with investment in CDO? CDO is also ultimately a product like securitization, where if the borrower defaults, I don't get money. So there's a default risk. Most primary risk is a default risk. If the market interest rate changes, then the market interest rate risk. Liquidity risk, if I don't have enough money to pay. Prepayment, if money is received early. Reinvestment risk, foreign exchange risk. These are very, very similar to investments in a typical fixed income security. When I invest in a bond, अच्छा यहाँ पे मैं bond में directly invest नहीं कर रहा हूँ. I am an investor who is investing in a CDO which has underlying borrowers, loans, debentures, etc. So the risk is similar to the risk of a bond. When I invest in a bond, what is the risk? That the issuer might default. What is the risk? Interest rates might change. What is the risk? That the issuer might prepay money or might not have liquidity to pay me money. It is exactly the same things that you see over here. Are we clear on this? We will discuss credit derivatives again if required, but otherwise it is there as a part of your separate theory as well. What are the reasons for stock index futures becoming more popular financial derivatives over stock futures in India? Remember, when we did derivatives, we said most people use index futures as compared to stock futures. Why? Because you have a 30 stock portfolio. For hedging, I'll have to hedge 30 separate stocks. But if it is index futures, I can take my portfolio beta and find how many index futures to be adjusted considering that beta. So over here, there is a lot of flexibility. हर एक किसी का कैसा भी portfolio है, they can use index futures for the purpose of hedging. There are possibility of speculative gains. They are more cost effective because I don't have to enter into 30 separate contracts. I can enter into a single contract, so more cost effective. it is difficult to manipulate. Stock futures might be manipulated because there may be one promoter who is holding in a stock, but index में आप कैसे manipulate करोगे? It is very difficult to manipulate. Index future consists of many securities, so being an average stock, it is relatively less volatile than the individual stock price. One can readily sell as one buys, so there is a deep market over here. So these are the important points, and define the term option Greeks. Greeks are nothing but factors, can be delta, gamma, vega, theta, rho, which measures how much a premium changes in response to the change in a particular factor. Like delta measures response to share price, vega measures response to volatility, rho measures response to rate of interest, and so on. Are we clear with this? Now, we will do this along with the derivatives chapter also separately, but there is some pure theory section that we want to kind of cover over here. So this is new on page 108. There is some new theory added, and on this the institute has not given any sum per se. There is some new theory added, so we will quickly discuss that because it can come in a possible MCQ or a case. In fact, the November 24 MTP has given an MCQ based case on this section only. MTP में आया अच्छा सा case है. We can see that separately for MTP series to November 21st case ही अच्छा है. So there can be options that you usually study in derivatives are what we call as plain vanilla. इसको actually बोलते हैं vanilla options, means simple options. Are we clear with this? However, there are exotic options. What do you mean by exotic option? जैसे vanilla एक simple flavor होता है, but when we go, we eat very different type of ice cream. So we might want some exotic flavors. So that has some special features. In a similar way, an exotic option can vary because of the payoff, time of exercise can be different. Options are more complex and they are generally in the OTC, over the counter. It is not really an exchange traded product. So first, there is a chooser option. What do you mean by chooser option? Option है, but the holder can choose ultimately at the time of exercise कि मेरे को इसको call option treat करना है, put option treat करना है. मस्त है ना? I can generally, what have we always studied? Either call or put. यहाँ पे there is an option chooser where the holder will get a choice at the end to choose whether he wants to treat it like a call option or a put option. Is it a very good product? But यहाँ पे अच्छा product है तो महंगा भी होगा. The premium here is usually quite high because you are getting a chance. Generally, option holder will almost always exercise, but then for that you will get a much higher premium. Chooser options. Then you have compound options. Acha, what is a compound option? It is an option on an option. Like for example, if at expiry you usually exercise, here you get a chance to buy another security at a predefined price. So it's an option on an option. So it's a compound option. Then there is barrier options. This was quite good. ये global financial crisis of 2008 में बहुत trigger हुए थे barrier options, which means we will say कि if a particular event happens, option might have a 5-year life, 10-year life, but if a particular event happens, the option will be exercised immediately. वो continue नहीं होएगा. Like for example, if your dollar rate crosses 60 rupees per dollar, it may be a 10-year option. I am not going to wait for 10 years. It will be immediately exercised. If a barrier is crossed, then the option is immediately exercised. You don't wait for the expiry. Binary options, also called as digital options. Binary means 0 or 1 typically. Or what does binary mean? One of the two things can happen. अभी यहाँ पे क्या होता है? Exercise होगा तो your payoff is different. We did sums where maybe your spotted expiry is 200, 220, 230, 40, your payoff can be different. In binary options, if a particular event happens, this is your payoff. इतना ही मिलना है. If the event does not happen, 0 is your payoff. तो यहाँ पे you don't have to calculate and find कि यार ये price इतना, no. In a binary option, if a particular event happens, you will be given a particular payoff. If it does not happen, then no payoff. Are we clear with this? So over here, this is binary options. Then you have Asian options. What do you mean by Asian options? Like you have studied about European and American. In Asian options, in all of these options, what do? You compare spotted expiry with exercise price. Asian option says, why are you just comparing the spotted expiry price on a single day? Let us compare the average price. So it's a 3-month option. You find the average price over 3 months and you compare that with the exercise price. Are we getting this? So over here these are called as Asian options, where you compare not spot at expiry, you compare the average spot with the exercise price. Asian options. Bermuda options, the exercise of this option is restricted to certain dates. Your European option you can exercise only at expiry. American option you can exercise anytime before expiry. Bermuda option will say if it's a 3-month contract, every 15 days you will have a choice. If you want to exercise, you can exercise, otherwise you can continue. So Bermuda option will give you options at different points of time. Are we clear with this? Okay, then you have basket options. ये काफी common है, where basket options will have underlying as a basket rather than a single security. Like index options are basically basket options, because underlying you have a basket of shares and not just a single share. Then spread options. In spread, payoff depends on the differences in prices between two underlyings. Like for example, when you look at high yield bonds and low yield bonds, वो दोनों के बीच में spread कितना है, उसके basis पे your payoff will be decided. So it is based on the spread. And look back options. Look back options means you can look back and decide whichever price you want to take. Like chooser option क्या बोलता है, you can choose call or put. Look back option says call है तो call है. But in the last 3 months, whichever price you think is your most favorable price, वो उठाने का exercise वैसे करेगा. Look back options. Are we clear with this? These are all exotic options. Usually you don't really have a tradable product over here. Why are we reviewing this? Classic MCQ. They will give you a feature and give you these 4-5 names. बोलेगे this is the closest feature to which option? कहाँ से समझ में आएगा? If you have not read this, there's 0%. There's going to be no sums over here per se on these options. But इसके ऊपर classic MCQ बैठेगा. एक paragraph दिया and the accountant will be confused क्या है और आपके पास आएगा. आपका भी सेम ही हालत होएगा. And there will be 4 different products given and you will have to select the appropriate one. Yes? Okay. Next you look at credit derivatives. Credit derivatives के ऊपर MTP November 24 Series 2 में Case 1 is based on credit derivatives. We will review that. But maybe that is along with the derivatives numerical part. But when we look at credit derivatives, in credit derivatives what happens? There is an underlying which is credit. Now derivative is something which derives value. So how will it derive value? Like for example, there can be products like 2 products. One is a CDO or CLO, collateralized debt obligations or collateralized loan obligations. आप CFA में इसको बहुत पढ़ते हो. In your CA 2-4 paragraph दिया है, you just read through that and proceed. Otherwise वो बहुत complicated है. And then there is something called as CDS, credit default swap. What we will first discuss is a CDS. What is a credit default swap? A credit default swap over here is a credit derivative which derives value from an underlying. Let us say I have bought a bond. A bond is having a 10-year life. 2 years have gone by. Money is going to come after 10 years, 8 years, whatever it is. I as an investor am worried that what if the issuer becomes bankrupt in that time frame? Then तो मेरा पूरा पैसा डूबेगा. How do I manage the credit risk? Credit risk is the possibility that the issuer can default. How do I manage the credit risk? So for managing the credit risk, there is a credit default swap. So the writer of the option will sell the option against a premium to the holder, and the writer will say that if there is a default during those 8 years, I will pay you the amount of default. So let us say 100 crore का bond है and this guy could not pay 50% of the money, then on the CDS writer will pay the CDS holder 50 crore. So मेरे को पैसा मिलना है. Ideally the holder will, the issuer should pay, issuer of the bond. But if the issuer of the bond defaults, I have taken an insurance and I will go to the writer and the writer will have to pay for me. Are we clear with this? These are called as CDS, credit default swaps. If there is a default, there will be a payment. If there is no default, there will be no payment. Are we clear with this? So we'll go first on the next page. CDS I would say is slightly more important than everything else which is newly added. Credit default swap. CDS provides insurance against the risk of default on a debt. Under this arrangement, one party called as the buyer needs protection against default, pays a periodic premium to another party called as the seller, who in turn assumes the default risk. Now why will the seller assume that risk? Because of premium. Hence in case of default there will be settlement, and in case there is no default, there is no cash flow, no settlement. although it resembles the options, but the element of choice is not there. So it more resembles like a swap arrangement. There's no option to exercise. If there's a default, paisa milna. If there's no default, paisa nahi milega. So it's called as a credit default swap instead of a credit option. Main features of a CDS. CDS is non-standardized. It's a private contract. It is not listed. They're normally not traded on any exchange. The International Swap and Derivatives Association publishes guidelines. ये MCQ में आया था. That who publishes guidelines for CDS? So International Swap and Derivatives Association. So they had given options like FedI and all of this. So International Swaps and Derivatives Association. CDS can be purchased from third party. Individuals who are buying bonds from a company can purchase CDS to protect the investment. The cost or the premium has a positive relationship with the risk. Higher is the risk of default, higher will be the premium. Lower is the risk of default, lower will be the premium. If an investor just buys CDS without being exposed to credit risk, यानी मेरे पास bond है ही नहीं, but मेरे को पता है कि this bond will default. Let's say Divan Housing, ILNFS, I know that these guys don't have money, they will default. I don't own their bonds, but I still want to make a profit. So what I will do, I will buy the CDS. कि यार ठीक है मैं थोड़ा प्रीमियम भर दूंगा. If they default, I will get the payoff. If 100 crore के bond पे 50 ही मिलने वाला है, the CDS writer will have to pay me 50. This is called as naked CDS. What is naked CDS? I don't have the bond. I'm just taking the CDS. Uses of CDS, hedging is one of the main uses. Arbitrage or even speculation, like for naked CDS, speculation is also one of the uses. Parties to CDS, initial borrower, let us say ILNFS may be the initial borrower. The buyer of the CDS, let's say as an investor, I have bought the CDS and then there is a seller. So over here, you will have seller who is a writer, makes, let us say, just a second. A writer who would say, let us say that I need to sell insurance and get a premium. Settlement of CDS again can be physical or cash. So you can either settle by net differences in prices, or you can give the entire bond to the CDS writer and the CDS writer will give you the entire face value. It is like saying that let's say bond issuer ने बोल दिया कि I can pay maximum 100 में से 25 on this bond. So I can go to the CDS writer and say you pay me the balance 75, net settlement. Or I can tell the CDS writer कि you take this entire bond and you give me the entire 100 rupees. फिर आप फोड़ो, issuer फोड़े. So physical as well as net settlement. Are we clear with this? अच्छा, apart from that, so this is CDS. Are we clear with CDS? Depends. It's a private contract, so you can negotiate the terms. Then you have a collateralized debt obligation. CDO is very similar to securitization, just that in securitization there is a pool of loans. Here there can be any asset-backed securities. There can be bonds, there can be other CDOs, it can be anything. Are backed by pool of bonds, asset-backed securities, REITs or CDOs. Accordingly, it covers collateralized bond obligation, loan obligation. We'll just quickly review it. There are various types of CDOs. Cash flow CDO, synthetic CDO, arbitrage CDO. अच्छा, कैश CDO में अंडरलाइन क्या होता है? कैश मार्केट डेट. सिंथेटिक CDO में the risk is synthetically transferred. Arbitrage CDO tries to capture the spread between the realized collateral and cost of borrowing. ये पढ़ के कुछ समझ में नहीं आने वाला. We can spend a lot of time to understand this, but at this stage, if it comes in the exam, you need to know the basic features. Read that. इतना exactly study material में इतना लिखा है, आधा एक पेज. इसके ऊपर, if something comes, will come from this. So just read this and proceed. Risks involved, we have read this in our compiler. Risks involved could be default. It is same as bond. Same as the bond risk. Default risk, interest rate risk, liquidity, prepayment, reinvestment. Same risk. जो bond में आता है, वो CDO में भी आएगा. Are we clear with this? Yes? Okay. Next you have, on page 110, you have weather derivatives. Now, this will again come possibly for theory. यहाँ पे underlying क्या होगा? Underlying will be weather. Weather can be rainfall, weather can be temperature, weather can be various things. Now earlier you would have protection, but protection will be against very adverse weather changes. Like insurance will give you protection against a tsunami, insurance will give you protection against an earthquake, against a flood. But अगर बारिश थोड़ा कम हुआ, little less, and your crops are damaged, they did not get enough, what will insurance give you any compensation for that? No. Now I am worried that this year rainfall is going to be less. No flood, no drought, no earthquake, but less rainfall, and that will affect my crops. I might have insurance, no insurance company is going to cover the risk of a lesser rainfall. और आप देखो टेम्परेचर अगर थोड़ा ज्यादा होता है, it has a very big effect. Like the most common thing people quote is coral. आपने कभी coral देखे? People do scuba diving and snorkeling, you see these colorful corals. People say that if the global warming is, अगर globally temperature 1.5 से 2 डिग्री बढ़ा, which is for you not much, 90% of the corals will die, 90% just by 2 degrees of increase. तो टेम्परेचर अगर आपका एवरेज बढ़ जाता है, दैट इज व्हाट ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस, पीपल आर सेइंग दैट अभी दिस ईयर एंटार्क्टिका में फर्स्ट टाइम जमीन दिखा, अभी फोटोज है, you could see actual land on Antarctica, because otherwise it's always covered 24 hours 365 days by snow. Maldives, people are saying, is going to sink after a few years because water levels are rising because of melting ice caps. Maldives is going to sink. तो अपना CA का प्रॉब्लम इतना बड़ा नहीं लग रहा है in the larger scheme of things, right? Okay, so we are trying to say that here we are taking derivatives against temperature, we are taking derivatives against rainfall, etc., which would have affected our output, volume, quantity, but could not have been covered by insurance. So these are weather derivatives. Now derivatives to आप बना ले, weather derivatives you can make. However, the problem over here is enough pricing, valuation. How will I do that for a temperature, for something like rainfall? It's a little difficult, so it's still evolving, but you can still, जैसे पहले बुकिंग चलता था क्रिकेट में, आजकल ड्रीम 11 चल रहा है, अभी वो रमी, so they will find ways in which they can price and do something. But right now theoretically this is to protect a farmer or a producer from adverse weather changes, but not as adverse कि insurance company cover कर. Are we clear with this? So if there is a change in a rainfall by a particular thing, maybe my option will be exercise and I will get some return. Are we getting this? So that is a weather derivative. These are usually linked to volumes. The problem over here for pricing a weather derivative is data, forecasting of weather. आपसे अच्छा कौन समझे? Weather forecasting, right? Okay, so over here, अपने यहाँ पे forecast काफी accurate निकलता है. Usually they come after the rain has happened. अभी 2 दिन पहले भी बहुत बारिश हुआ था. You are advised not to step out. हमें दिख रहा है इतना थंडर हो रहा है. It's after the rain and thunder has happened, right? Okay. So temperature modeling. Okay. Next you have electricity derivatives. अच्छा, in electricity derivatives ये काफी popular होता है. What is the underlying over here? Power. Electricity is the underlying, and electricity is a very big input cost for so many industries, and electricity prices काफी fluctuate हो सकते हैं, and as a result we enter into a derivative. क्या हो सकता है? Can be an electricity future, can be an electricity forward, can be an electricity option, or a swap as a case maybe, where the underlying is electricity, that is power, and power के तो quoted prices भी होते हैं. Are we clear with this? Okay, so then there is real options. अच्छा, this we will do along with derivatives, for which there are detailed 3 sums which the institute has newly added. काफी खतरनाक sums है. We have a separate video also real options के लिए. But what is a real option? It is kind of an interplay between derivatives as well as capital budgeting. Usually आपके options में underlying होता क्या है? Shares, debentures, bonds, currency, commodity, weather, electricity, credit. These are almost all financial factors. Can your underlying be a capital budgeting project? Yes. Abandonment option. What is abandonment? Right to sell. Put option. Put option क्या होता है? Right to sell. I am entering into a project, but I am a little scared. I'm like, यार ये project में enter करेंगे, इतना खर्चा करेंगे, what if it does not work out the way it should? So people are in 2 minds. Government says, I'll give you an abandonment option. Tu ek kaam kar, you go to Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand and you make dams. No, but I don't think people will buy as much over there. You make it. If people buy it, well and good, you continue the project. Otherwise, you can sell it to the government at this price. So now I'm happy. I'm like, theek yaar, in the worst case, if people don't buy hydropower as much, then I can sell the project entirely to the government at this amount. And if they buy, to nothing like it. So this is an abandonment option. This is a real option. It is an option not on a financial asset. It is on a real physical project. Abandonment option. I say similarly, there can be growth options. Like I want to enter into a project, but यार मेरे को देखना है गवर्नमेंट कौन सा आने वाला है. Like दिल्ली में बीच में गवर्नमेंट है, where they give power free. अभी I am a power company. अगर वो re-elect हो गए, power free जाने वाला है. Why would I enter into that market? No, but if there is some other government who is going to charge for power, then I might want to do. So I want to enter into a project. Abandonment is exit. Growth or entry options are buying. I don't want to let that opportunity go, but I want an option. So I'll say मैं पैसा डालूंगा, but यार I am ready to commit provided some things like power tariff इतना हो जाए जो एक साल बाद दिख जाएगा. Are we getting this? So these are options on actual projects. Are we clear with this? So we will review this growth options, abandonment options, timing options, etc. So when should I invest? Timing. Can I abandon and leave, etc. These are real options for which separate sums will have to be done. Okay? Okay. So that takes care of derivatives by and large. We will go to the next chapter. Now derivatives पे theory आपको आने का ज़्यादा chance है. Among all of these chapters, if a theory comes, usually mutual fund is a chapter. I hardly see theory on portfolio. Rarely आता. Mutual fund का कभी कभार आ जाता है. This ratio, that ratio, tracking error, this or that comes. You see that technical and all of that analysis at random walk, Dow Jones, very core theory topics. Derivatives you get theory. You have various types of options, credit, default, this, that. You do get theory questions and MCQ questions on derivatives. Foreign exchange relatively less. Foreign exchange जो पूछना उन लोग आपको practical में ज़्यादा पूछ लेता. So next you go to foreign. IFM also you get theory. IFM में practical बड़ा sum आता है, but then I have to give 8 or 10 or 12 marks sum. If I don't want to devote as many marks, I'll ask you a small theory on international financial management or capital board. So IFM भी theory में ज़्यादा आता है as compared to practical. Yes? Okay. So then you have Forex. I would say among the topics, Forex has some of the least importance when it comes to asking theory questions on Forex per se. So अपन Forex पे जाते हैं, फटाफट एक बार review कर लेते हैं. Where is Forex? So note on exposure netting. Remember we have studied netting and matching in foreign exchange. You try to net off what? Sir, import export, inflow outflow, loan taken, loan received, cash in one currency, cash in another currency. You net off your exposures and take protection if required or investment if required for the net amount. This will help you in reducing transaction cost. And exposure netting refers to offsetting exposure in one currency with exposures in same or another currency. Same yani you have an import of 7 lakh, export of 4 lakh dollars. You can net off and take exposure only for 3 lakhs in different currencies. Remember we had sums where cash was in different currencies. You pool that into a single currency and then net amount you invest or borrow as a guess. Okay. Second, nostro, vostro, loro. Jana pehchana lag raha? My account with you, your account with me, your account or someone else's account with a third party. So these are different terminologies given to accounts in the foreign exchange setup. Okay. Next you have concept of purchasing power parity. Have we studied this? We say that all a basket of goods should cost the same once converted into a single currency base, and that forms the base for different currencies having different exchange rates and forms the base for IRP. We say that the interest and inflation rates, as the inflation rate changes, purchasing power changes. Are we clear with this? Acha. Next, leading and lagging. Have we heard this before? Leading means early payment. Well, why will I pay early, sir? Because I get a cash discount. Lagging means delayed payment. Well, why will I do a delayed payment? Well, I don't have the money. So I'm okay paying some interest and paying later, so leading and lagging in the context of foreign exchange. Operations in forex market are exposed to a number of risks. So which are those risks? Remember, you have discussed three types of risks: transaction exposure, translation exposure, and operating exposure. Transaction exposure was a forex risk on that transaction. Translation exposure is on translation, and economic exposure is the exposure on operations. Are we clear with this? Okay, what is the meaning of interest rate parity? We have studied the interest rate parity theory. It's the same explanation that you have to give. All dealings in foreign exchange must affect the exchange position whether delivery is taken or not, but cash position is affected when only actual delivery takes place. Remember, last question in forex was a question where we had to find the cash position and the exchange position. We did a few things that if I were to spot buy dollars, it will affect my cash position as well as exchange position. But if I were to do a forward buy will affect my exchange position, but it will not affect my cash position till the time the actual delivery happens. So fair, your exchange position will be affected whenever you take a position, forward buy, sell, cancel, whatever. But your cash position will only change if there is an actual movement of money. Are we clear with this? So that is question number 7. Then you have note on money market hedging. Remember, we did quite a few sums on money market hedging. आपको थोड़ा तकलीफ हो रहा था. So when we look at money market hedging, what do? You see whether you have an asset or liability in the foreign currency. Let's say you have to pay in dollars, so you will say that I have a liability in dollars, so I will invest in dollars. So I will use the money market where I will invest in dollars, but where will I get the money? I will borrow in rupees in the money market, convert it, and then after the stated number of months, I will use the investment proceeds to pay off my dollar liability. So thereby my forex risk is hedged. Now the inherent disadvantage over here is it is a lot more complicated as compared to a simple forward. But the advantage over here is it can give you risk protection in case the forwards turn out to be much more expensive. Okay, fixes the future rate, eliminating the downside exposure, and you can use this where forward contracts are not available. So if forward contracts are not available in certain currencies, you can use these operations. Are we clear with this? Okay. Next you have chapter on IFM. I would say relatively among the practical chapters, I would give more weight on derivatives and more weight on IFM when it comes from an exam perspective. Otherwise, ये forex में hardly कुछ sum आ रहा है. Mergers and acquisitions, again relatively less sums you will possibly get. List the main objectives of international cash management. So your cash is in various currencies. You want to manage that cash. You want to do it in such a way that your transaction cost is the minimum, the income is the maximum. Whichever subsidiary or affiliate needs money, gets money at that particular date. You minimize political risk in certain countries, like Russia में हुआ ना. So many Russian billionaires had money in Europe, and war happened. Money was frozen. They did not get their money. And as a result, there is political risk. So over here, objectives: manage currency exposure, overall cash requirements, transaction cost, political risk, get economies of scale, etc. Economies of scale क्या होता है? If you remember, one sum in foreign exchange you have done where there was a slab-wise interest rate. The more you deposit, the more interest you get. Less you deposit, less interest you get. तो हम बोल रहे हमारा पैसा इतने सारे जगह पे dispersed है in different currencies. I'll bring it in one currency and invest it and get economies of scale. More investment will give me higher return. Okay, instruments of international finance. Various instruments can be euro bonds, foreign bonds, fully hedged bonds, floating rate notes, euro commercial paper. These are euro bonds are international bonds which are denominated, let us say, in euros. Foreign bonds are denominated in any other currency other than your currency. Fully hedged bonds are bonds where the risk of the currency fluctuation does not exist. You have ensured that this is a bond which will redeem at this value only. Floating rate notes is the rate of interest keeps on changing, and euro commercial papers are for maturities less than a year. They are commercial papers. Euro bonds will have more than 1 year. Commercial papers less than 1 year. Okay, external commercial borrowings or ECBs are becoming an important source of financing. Have you heard about ECB? What is ECB? You borrow money from outside India. So over here, usually outside India, the rates of interest are relatively lower than as compared to India, and hence you can possibly borrow at a relatively lower rate. So an external commercial borrowing usually gives you advantages of borrowing money at a relatively lower rate. Are we clear with this? But again, it exposes you to exchange rate. It also has a lot of FEMA and foreign exchange compliance requirements. Okay. Next, you have explain the complexities involved in international capital budgeting. In the IFM chapter, we have done sums involving international capital budgeting. You have to predict the inflation in different countries, the discount rates in different countries, the possible foreign exchange rates that can change. All of that is only on the exchange front. Apart from that, there can be repatriation. Money may not be repatriated back. There may be some restrictions. There can be double taxation. There can be withholding tax. There can be political risk. There can be so many other things which increase the complexity in an international capital budgeting decision vis-a-vis a regular capital budgeting decision. So over here, you'll have political risk, restrictions imposed on cash flow distribution, changes in inflation, effect of foreign exchange. 4-5 चीज आप लिख ले, more than sufficient. So these are common points that we can see. Foreign exchange risks, profits remitted to the firm are subjected to tax. See, the biggest things are tax, inflation, exchange rate changes, political risk. ये 4 सबसे बड़े factors होते हैं. Withholding tax, double tax, inflation being different, forward exchange rates may not necessarily be the same, and the political risk that the money may not be allowed to be repatriated back. There might be restrictions which are put in. These are the most important risks. Are we clear with this? Okay. Debt route for foreign exchange funds. So if I want forex funds, from how can I raise? Well, I can take syndicated bank loans. I can go to JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley and raise funds. Bank loans, euro bonds, I can issue bonds, foreign bonds, commercial papers, ECBs. ये same के same terms है. So they are saying, from where can I raise foreign finance? I can go to a group of banks and raise money. Or for long term, I can raise euro bond or foreign bond. For short term, I can raise euro commercial paper or an external commercial borrowing from a single bank. Syndicated borrowing will be from a group of banks. Okay, impact of GDR on Indian capital market. Well, GDR, global depository receipts, have helped in Indian companies raising funds from foreign retail investors as well, and that has reduced their overall cost of financing and ease of financing, where Indian investors were not necessarily there. The problem in a GDR is the Indian investors are sidelined. You don't really raise money from the Indian investors, you're raising, so Indian investors being sidelined is a problem. Capital market is not independent from the rest of the world. Indian capital market is shifting. Considerable amount of foreign investment has found way in Indian market, so might as well you do it in their currencies only. Okay. Next you have this question, explain briefly the salient features of an FCCB, foreign currency convertible bond. Have you heard about such a bond before? This is a bond which is issued in a foreign currency, but it has a conversion feature. So over here, I may issue a bond and this might eventually get converted. So यहाँ पे आपको RBI वगैरह का permission लगता है, because you are getting money but you are not paying out dollars, and hence maybe you are giving stake to someone. So prior approval etc. might be needed. So prior permission is needed. FCCB can be issued subject to applicable laws. Tax on FCCB will be as per Indian tax law, etc. Point 1 में they've just explained what FCCB is. Okay, then there is euro convertible bonds. It's like your regular bond issued in euros or in foreign currency. These bonds can have a possible call or a put option. Call option is a right to buy. An issuer can call the bond back and give the money back. A put option is a holder having a right, where the holder can sell the bond and the issuer will have to pay money. Okay, project appraisal under inflationary conditions. So you have done inflation in capital budgeting. So they are just explaining that if there is inflation, you have to consider cash flows, maybe cost, revenue, discount rate, everywhere you consider the inflation and find what we call as nominal cash flows and discount the nominal cash flows at the nominal discount rate. And they have just explained all of that. Question 10, there exists a vast difference between project and parent cash flows. What are the factors? What is the difference between project cash flow and parent cash flow? देखो, project cash flow means comparing the cash flow of the project in India, that's it. I'm not looking at withholding tax. Parent cash flow में क्या होगा? Let's say in project cash flow, you are planning to set up a project in India. Is that project viable? We will see कि India में कितना cash flow generate हो रहा है. Am I earning enough return? Yes. That is at the project level. But at the parent level, that money will have to be repatriated back. So if it is repatriated back, maybe currency, maybe exchange rate, more importantly withholding, double taxation, ये सब देखना पड़ेगा. Remember we did a sum of perfect INC. हम करते ही गए, डबल टैक्सेशन आते ही गया. सो ऑल ऑफ दैट व्हेन यू इवैल्यूएट, you have to consider all of that. If I had to just look at project cash flow, that what is that joint venture project earning, so it would have ended. But then I have to remit money. When I remit, I have to pay royalty to my parent. What is the exchange rate? What is the double taxation? All of that will be considered in a parent cash flow evaluation. Problems faced in international capital budgeting decisions and how they can be overcome. So problems are multinational companies have foreign exchange risk, point 1. Second, restrictions are imposed on transfer of profits, and after tax cash flows need to be considered. So there can be restrictions on profits, there can be exchange rate risk. ये same चीज है. देखो अपन ने बोला तीन सबसे बड़े चार होते हैं actually. One is inflation, then is the risk of repatriation of money, political risk. Restrictions can be imposed. Then is the possible risk of exchange rate movements and taxes being levied. All of that can be resulting in big risks. Next, the flow of optimizing cash flow movements and minimizing total value of intercompany fund flow with the combined efforts of subsidiaries is the need of the hour. कुछ समझ में नहीं आएगा क्या लिखा है. This is nothing but netting. Remember we did one sum where we had the Hong Kong subsidiary, Indian subsidiary, London, US. So we were saying different subsidiary, different cash flows. So what we want to do is we want to net and match in such a way that the foreign currency risk is minimized. Because if I actually do all the transactions independently, Indian company paying to Hong Kong paying to US, there may be so much bankers charges etc. which is unnecessarily being incurred, and as a result, we would say we want to reduce the number of cross-border transactions, reduce the need for foreign exchange conversion, improves cash flow forecasting, and try to get an accurate report. What are FCCB? We have done this earlier with a few advantages. They give the investor the flexibility to get the money back or convert into bonds. Companies don't have to issue equity today, they can delay, issue it in the future. FCCBs are marketable, companies prefer these bonds and it results in delayed dilution. Convertible bond gives the investor the flexibility to convert the bond. Briefly explain how centralized cash management helps MNCs in their treasury management. Centralized cash management, how does it help in treasury management? If they are saying that if I have to manage cash, then on a centralized basis, I will ensure that minimum cash balance is maintained as required. I will use the money judiciously, because ऐसा नहीं कि हर एक company और हर एक subsidiary is operating in isolation. If there is surplus funds which is not needed in one subsidiary, I can pool it and transfer it somewhere. Aid the center to generate maximum returns. Aid the center to take advantage of multinational netting and so on. Maximizing utilization of transfer pricing mechanism, exploit currency movements. आपको ये read ही करना पड़ेगा. Having a broad understanding and proceeding further. What do you mean by international financial center? Gift city. होगा नहीं, यहाँ पे आप पीछे देखना पड़ेगा आपको. It's an exam question of May 24. So we will share it separately, but in suggested answers you can find May 24 के अंदर what are the benefits of an IFC. So your page किधर है पीछे? 2. So you have this IFC International Financial Center Gift City. आजकल अपन सुन रहे उसके बारे में काफी. Have you guys been to the Gift City? No? काफी अच्छा है. You'll feel वो इंडिया के बाहर का एकदम इंटरनेशनल स्टैंडर्ड्स पे उन्होंने बनाया हुआ है. But it is like a zone where it is assumed in a way that it is not in India. Separate laws, separate tax regulations, separate money transfer, everything is separately applied. Why? I want to make India kind of a hub. Like एशिया में कौन से हब्स है? एशिया में देयर इज सिंगापुर, देयर इज हांगकांग एंड देन देयर इज टोक्यो. ये साइड पे दुबई अभी बना है, बट इट इज नॉट एज बिग अ फाइनेंशियल हब. So I want to give a possibility where international investors can probably look at the South Asian operations from India, but India they are a little reluctant because of the regulations, because of the laws, taxes. So we have said कि काम करेंगे, we will make a gift city, which is an international financial center, where you will be applied different tax laws, much more liberalized regulations, easy compliances, and hence we want to make a financial center. So when you look at IFC, the features over here is constituents of an IFC, highly developed infrastructure, stable political environment. So I am saying that India के laws भले कुछ भी change होए, I am giving you a separate legal framework. The location has to be strategic. Maybe it has to, जैसे ये bullet train project है अपना, जो बन रहा है काफी टाइम से, but it is likely to end at Gift City. It will end somewhere over there so that it gets good connectivity, airport वगैरह, everything. Quality of life, because a lot of expats will come, you want to have a very good quality of life, अच्छा ecosystem बनाना है. Rational regulatory framework and a sustainable economy. Gift, India's international financial center. So if you look at the history of Gift, it started with a lot of halla bulla, then थोड़ा ठंडा हो गया, then वापस they started picking up and a few exchanges, SGX वगैरह came. अभी सुबह को आप गिफ्ट निफ्टी भी देखते होगे. So Nifty also, NSE also moved over there, and अभी the biggest impetus that Gift got is वहाँ पे दारू allowed. Quite literally, they said because Gujarat is officially at least a state where you cannot have alcohol. So but expat को तो चाहिए alcohol, अपने रह सकते हैं उसके बिना. So they said कि यार एक्सपर्ट को रखना तो अल्कोहल रखना पड़ेगा. सो अभी प्रॉपर्टी प्राइसेस शॉट थ्रू द रूफ व्हेन अल्कोहल वाज अलाउड. लिटरली बहुत 20 से 30% इन 2 months बढ़ा प्रॉपर्टी प्राइस, merely because alcohol was allowed officially in Gift City, right? So that was the latest impetus. ऐसा लिखना नहीं है एग्जाम में, but the latest impetus literally is the allowing of alcohol in Gift City. The government is trying to do its best to make it fairly competitive. Okay, so over here this is regarding this international financial center. What was asked in May 24, just a second, if you can just focus, what was asked in May 24 was what do you mean by an international financial center and what are the benefits? Benefits over here are it provides opportunities for qualified professionals. So अभी आपको इंडिया के बाहर जाने का जरूरत नहीं है और brain drain can be stopped. You can go to Gift City, go to Ahmedabad and go to Gift City and you don't need to go overseas. The best of the institutions will possibly come there. आपके I think Big Four भी सभी है उधर, if I'm not wrong, है ना? आपने कभी ट्रैक नहीं किया. So platform for qualified and talented professionals, it will help stopping brain drain from India, bring back financial services which are presently carried out overseas, and trading of complex derivative products can be started from India where regulations are much more easier now. In the Gift over here, the most important thing of Gift is it is a financial center. Like SEZ आपने सुने हुए, काफी बच्चे बोलते हैं SEZ is largely for manufacturing. Gift is not manufacturing, it is financial in nature. It is Gujarat Industrial Financial Center or in technology or something. It is more of a service driven financial center rather than an SEZ or something EPZ, which is mainly being a manufacturing center. Are we clear with this? Okay, we'll do the other theory questions probably later. Interest rate management करते हैं थोड़े टाइम में. We will go to business valuation. Now in business valuation there is a fair bit of theory that is added, for which again we have put a separate video and we have done separate theory for business valuation. Remember we discussed regarding distressed company valuation, going versus non-going concern. Last में आपके book के we will review that again, but all of that is a new theory added in business valuation. We will come to that. तो एग्जाम में अगर कुछ आता है and it came in the MTP, they have asked a question on first Chicago method. अभी first Chicago सुन के बहुत डरावना लगेगा. First Chicago method is nothing but scenario analysis. They asked you a method के solve using first Chicago method, but first Chicago is nothing but base case, worst case, best case scenario, and आप उसको measure करें. चलो, let's first quickly review business valuation. Few questions over here, and then we'll go behind. Write a note on buyback of shares and what is the impact of P ratio upon buyback. अच्छा, usually why is buyback done? Buyback is usually done to ensure investors, I mean if I don't have utilization, if I have surplus cash, I give it back. So उससे क्या हो जाता है, मेरे number of shares reduce. Now I'm on page 214. My number of shares reduce, my EPS increases, and thereby my market price usually goes up. Usually my P ratio also appreciates because investors will now say, "Arey wow, this is a company which is utilizing its capital in a much more efficient manner," and hence the P ratio also kind of sometimes improves. So over here, buyback is usually done for prudently utilizing the surplus funds, and it usually increases the EPS, increases the P ratio, and increases the market price as well. Difference between EVA and MVA. अच्छा, EVA economic value added is NOPAT minus invested capital into WACC. EVA is for the year concept, whereas market value added MVA is the market value of debt and equity minus the book values of debt and equity. So MVA is as on date concept, EVA is for the period concept. Are we clear with this? अरे बराबर क्या नहीं? So this is EVA MVA. Next, explain how cash flow based valuation is different from income based valuation. Also explain the steps. Cash flow based valuation will take cash flow as a base, that is after adding back depreciation, doing free cash flow, etc. Whereas income based valuation looks at accounting income without making a separate cash flow adjustment. Usually between the two, people generally prefer a cash flow based valuation to be more superior as compared to the income based valuation. Now MV or market value added is an attempt to resolve some of the issues in EVA. Not necessarily the case. MVA is something which is as on date. As on date, how much does the investor value you over and above the book value? Whereas EVA is each year how much economic profit you are additionally generating. So it is to some extent. You cannot always say that EVA में problem क्या था. People were saying EVA अच्छा, हाँ but ये तो ये साल का अच्छा. Overall position क्या? MVA can help you with that, but EVA is also a different parameter. It is a for the period item. MVA is as on date item. Okay, next, relative valuation approach is a significant departure from intrinsic value. What is relative? Achha, next question also similar. Relative valuation is a method to arrive at a relative value using a comparative. Elaborate this statement. देखो, intrinsic value usually you calculate as present value of future cash flows. So we say value of a share is determined based on the present value of future cash flows. Relative valuation says कि यार खुद के cash flows चलो ठीक है, but I need to see how your company is benchmarked as compared to the peers. If everyone is trading at a P multiple of 10, आपका intrinsic value कुछ भी आ जाए, why will investor pay you more than 10 times of the earnings? So relative valuation is a significant departure. Relative valuation looks at the multiple commanded by similar companies in your industry for the purpose of your valuation, whereas intrinsic valuation looks at your own earning potential, cash flow generating capabilities for the purpose. So in relative valuation, you will find out the drivers, results based on the drivers. Drivers क्या हो सकता है? Maybe for your company sales is the driver. For WhatsApp user base was the driver. जितना ज़्यादा user उतना value ज़्यादा. For let us say Zomato food deliveries, book my show ticket bookings. So what is the driver of value? You identify that and try to find the value based on the driver. कुछ नहीं तो EPS अपन ले सकते, P multiple. Value driver is earnings, earnings higher तो value higher. रियल एस्टेट कंपनी के लिए लैंड बैंक कैन बी द वैल्यू ड्राइवर. कितना बड़ा लैंड बैंक है हमारे पास. देन फाइंड कंपेरेबल फर्म्स एंड फाइंड यूजिंग comparable company. So relative valuation looks at EPS, P ratio, whatever it is, depending on the value driver you have selected and values it, whereas intrinsic value looks at the present value of future cash flows and tries to value it. Are we clear with this? अच्छा, एक बार पीछे रिव्यू कर लेते. We have discussed this along with sums and numbers. If you want to review it again, we have done this. But आप YouTube पे भी जा सकते हो. There is a separate video for the theory as well as the sums. Business valuation. We'll quickly review this. Going concern versus non-going concern valuation. You know, going concern valuation, you will have goodwill as well, whereas non-going concern assumption, goodwill वगैरह कुछ भी नहीं आएगा. Are we clear with this? Distressed companies. While valuing distressed companies, you take modified cash flows. You find the distressed value. You find your regular value based on the cash flows and find what we call as probability of distress. Find the probability of distress and we will find the value, for example, as regular DCF value is 1000. into let's say 70% plus distress value is 500 into 30%, probability of distress is 30%. Distress होगा तो value सिर्फ 500 आएगा, 30% is the probability. If there is no distress, value is 1000. So you can find the distress value, find the probability of distress, and find the value of a distress firm. Okay. Next, you have certain examples of valuation of startups. So when you go to value a startup, there are various methods for valuing startups, like a Burkus approach. Burkus identified 5 factors, assigned a value of $5 lakh to each of the factors, and found the value. Cost to duplicate approach: if someone were to make a startup like yours, how much money will they have to spend? Comparable transactions: if someone were to have a multiple similar to yours, how much would the value, like how many dollars per user? जैसे अभी एक मैंने ट्वीट पढ़ा था. Now there is a very, I would say controversial and not only fans सुना है अपन, it's not as, but उसमें value per user is a value per employee is maximum. Like you look at Google, you look at so there is a tech companies है ना, टेक कंपनीज में जितने एम्प्लॉइज उसके सामने वैल्यूएशन करते हैं. सो इफ यू लुक एट गूगल, माइक्रोसॉफ्ट, एवरीवेयर, हर एक एम्प्लॉय का क्या वैल्यू है. सो यू लुक एट द स्टाफ ऑफ गूगल एंड यू लुक एट द मार्केट कैप ऑफ गूगल. यू विल से मार्केट कैप ऑफ गूगल डिवाइडेड बाय कितने एम्प्लॉइज ऑफ गूगल, तो एक एम्प्लॉय का कितना वैल्यू, मिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स में जाता है भाई, 10-15 ऐसे मिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स में जाता है. तो दैट इज ऑल्सो अ वैल्यूएशन मेट्रिक. व्हाट्सएप में जैसे हमने बोला था 55 एम्प्लॉइज ही थे व्हेन इट गॉट सोल्ड फॉर $15 billion. सो मल्टीपल पर एम्प्लॉय कि इतने कम टेक में आपने कितना वैल्यू जनरेट किया. सो वैल्यू ड्राइवर्स. सो ओवर हियर you have comparable transactions, scorecard valuation method. So you have scorecard valuation, you have score based on different parameters, strength of team, market opportunity, industry, product or service, competitive nature, etc. And based on that you make a scorecard vis-a-vis your comparable, how much should be your value. First Chicago method, which is a scenario analysis, basically best, worst and base case scenario, and find the average value based on that, came in the MTP of November 24. A sum on this. Venture capital method would look at the exit value and you say exit पे मेरे को इतना multiple चाहिए, तो today if I back calculate how much should be my value. If I want 5 times a multiple at exit, then $100 million will be the value after 5 years, and if I need an IRR of 30%, what should be the value today? I will back calculate. Venture capital method. Then you had valuation of digital platforms. They can be your LinkedIn, Instagram, Google Pay. These are digital platforms. So based on the underlying value driver, you can find the value. Next you have, I think, professional or consulting firms like your CA firms. You look at your KPI, key performance indicators, and try to value based on how well your key performance indicators are shaping up. And last में हमने discuss किया था ESG, environmental, social and governance. So over here, you will look at the ESG factors and either adjust the cash flows depending on how your ESG score is, or you adjust the discount rate based on how your ESG score is. Are we clear with this? Yes? Ajay, so these are a few theory level additions which are there for business valuation. काफी है, for which we have done sums as well and detailed theory for this, more than an hour or 2 for this, so you should refer that if you have any problems. We'll just review before we go to the last 1 or 2 chapters. We'll quickly review the theory addition from this section, page 253 or 256 के आसपास जाएगा. For foreign exchange, you have something called as SWIFT. Have we discussed the word SWIFT earlier? What is SWIFT? Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Now, if I have to transfer money in India, NPCI करके होता है, National Payments Clearing Corporation of India. आप चालू लेक्चर में किसी ना किसी को जीपे करते रहते हैं, right? So that ways over here, that is managed by NPCI, right? But that is because RBI can oversee all the payments. RBI को पता है payer कौन है, receiver कौन है. Problem is if the money is going outside India, RBI does not have jurisdiction. Federal Reserve in US does not have jurisdiction over payer, so you are stuck. So two people have different इसको प्रोटोकॉल बोलते हैं. You have different protocols of how do you communicate, and SWIFT is a mechanism where you standardize and you say that if money has to be transferred, what are the set of instructions to be sent for an international transfer. और SWIFT के जो codes है, INR, GBP, USD, JPY, all of these are SWIFT codes for each currency. Yes, okay. SWIFT क्या होता है? It's a common language for financial transactions. Using centralized data processing, it is important to know that SWIFT is only a standardized communication system and not a transaction settlement system. SWIFT only helps communicating in a single language. If I am transferring money from India to, let us say, Japan, SWIFT gives me that common platform कि भाई ये बंदे को, like India में बैंक, like India में you have आधार number. You think across the world किधर भी आधार का concept है? आपका UPI पूरा आधार के भरोसे ही तो चल रहा है. But if someone outside India has to transfer, उनको आधार समझेगा ही नहीं. So SWIFT has to act as a bridge. It is not a clearing mechanism. It is just a way in which you are communicating कि यहाँ से ये बंदे के अकाउंट में पैसा जाना चाहिए. So that is a SWIFT system. Are we clear with this? Okay. National and international payment gateways. There are पेमेंट गेटवेज विच एनेबल इंटरनेशनल पेमेंट एज वेल. जैसे आपने सुना रहेगा पेपाल करके है, सुना है आपने? इंडिया में इतना नहीं चलता है. पीटर थियल करके बहुत ही स्मार्ट बंदा है. इफ यू हैव टाइम यू कैन रीड हिज बुक कॉल्ड एज 0 to 1. इट्स वन ऑफ द बेस्ट बुक्स ऑन स्टार्टिंग अप दैट यू विल रीड. आपको टेक्स्ट बुक से ज्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड लगेगा, इतना सा बुक है. बहुत खतरनाक बुक है. 0 to 1 पीटर थियल ने लिखा हुआ है, फाउंडर ऑफ पेपाल. सो ही made this payment platform where you can transfer money internationally as well. So there may be international or national payment. In India you sometimes go to pay तो अपने को भीम दिखता है कितनी बार, और you see bill desk करके आता है, payu money का. These are national payment gateways. They will not facilitate international payments. So there may be payment gateways which facilitate the payment in a secure. What is a payment gateway? It enables payment in a very secure way. You have always grown in an environment जहां पे आप तो बिंदास पेमेंट करते हैं. जब भी हम लोग छोटे थे, everyone was scared. Imagine you are putting your bank account. Your parents and everyone was so scared that how will we put in numbers? हमारा किसी ने देख लिया, चोरी हो गया. So we had to have, our country has come along when we are among the one of the best in the world. Okay. Better than US and European countries as well when it comes to payment settlement because of Aadhaar and everything. So people would be worried that what if my data is gone? What if someone comes and takes away our bank money? So वो एक secured line जो बनाना, वो payment gateway ने बनाया. They said I will not read your data. No, आपको पैसा इधर से उधर transfer करना है. I will act as a mediator between you and your bank and someone else's bank. You don't. देखो अपन अभी रहे सुस्त. We don't want to type in bank account number, add beneficiary, उतना patience ही नहीं है. So a payment gateway, all of that done. वो गोला घूमता रहता है, तब तक वो payment gateway वो सब कर रहा है, verifying the credentials and but वो पूरा secure line पे होता है. So people who are even sitting on the payment gateway don't really see what is happening. Your private, आपके अकाउंट में कितना पैसा है, it's just the transaction data in an encrypted form that is going away. That is payment gateway, one of the biggest. fintech जो बोलता है ना, it's the biggest thing जिसने पुश किया है आज के डिजिटल इकोनॉमी को. बिकॉज अगर पेमेंट ऑनलाइन नहीं हो पाता तो ये पूरा जो आप देख रहे हो कुछ भी नहीं हो पाता. It is because of the digital payments that all of this is sitting on digital payments, right? Okay, so payment gateway is equivalent to a physical mode of transfer that authenticates, routes the payment details in extremely secure environment. The services ranges from collecting and sending payments to banks, e-commerce sites, etc. This is payment gateways. Various things, they give you multiple payment options, minimize the risk, real-time reports are there, customer refund can be generated, merchant can get rid of those softwares like वो बॉक्स वगैरह डालने का क्रेडिट कार्ड के लिए जरूरत नहीं है, क्यूआर कोड पे हो जाएगा. So a lot of benefits. There are some challenges. Payments may not happen at all because a customer may not have an account. Some payment gateways have only limited number of banks. There are some problems of reliability, delivery and limited payment options, etc. Exchange rate determination. Generally the best way for exchange rate determination is usually interest rate or inflation rate. However, there can be other factors like fiscal deficit or surplus, trade barriers if any, intervention by central banks, government controls. So if your central bank is intervening, like we said, China had pegged this rate, so that will affect the exchange rate. If I am current account deficit, demand supply, I will always buy more dollars. It will impact me. Expectations, overall speculators will expect a particular type of a movement, and accordingly various factors which affect exchange rate determination. The most important factor is inflation or interest rate, but beyond that, deficit or surplus, trade barriers if any, government intervention or central bank intervention, etc. is also relevant. Economic exposure, foreign exchange risk is critical component of any business. Economic exposure, the exposure over here can be to protect against volatility, help cost reduction, get competitive advantage, improved cash flow, compliance. ये सब general theory है जो आपके study mat में. इसके ऊपर कुछ question बन के आ गया तो you should just know these few basic points. Hedging risk, you can hedge risk using forwards, futures, etc. In international financial management, we used to always say कि भाई गिफ्ट तो important है ही, बट अभी गिफ्ट आके गया. बट अदर देन दैट स्टिल इंटरनेशनल गवर्नमेंट का बहुत फोकस है, एटलीस्ट अंडर दिस एग्जिस्टिंग गवर्नमेंट विच इज लाइकली टू रिमेन टिल द टाइम यू राइट द एग्जाम्स. उनका काफी फोकस है गिफ्ट साइड पे, एंड हेंस द क्वेश्चंस ऑन गिफ्ट आर क्वाइट लाइकली टू कम. मे बी अभी गिफ्ट के फीचर्स के बारे में पूछा है, ड्रॉबैक और मे बी द कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स, ऑल ऑफ दिस कैन बी आस्क्ड. So as we said, we need a highly developed infrastructure, stable environment, strategic location, rationale, gift city, some features have been given. Achha, then you have sovereign funds. A theory has been added. Sovereign funds. India में, in fact, world के जो biggest investors है, कौन है आपके हिसाब से? Are sovereign funds. Biggest investors of the world. Like अबू धाबी में there is ADI, अबू धाबी इन्वेस्टमेंट अथॉरिटी, उसको मुबादला भी बोलते हैं. और नॉर्वे में है उनका जो नॉर्वे सोवराइन फंड, और सिंगापुर में देयर इज समवन कॉल्ड तेमासेक और GIC. दीज आर फंड्स ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट विच आर इन्वेस्टिंग, एंड हेंस दे आर ह्यूज पूल्स ऑफ मनी, एंड government can use these funds among other things to even invest some part in equity etc. और sovereign funds का because it is government funds उसमें ESG importance बहुत high. So if your ESG is off the place, a government will never invest in a company जहाँ पे ESG in place नहीं है. So a lot of companies are now saying कि भाई पहले तो ठीक है वो annual report में थोड़ा शोशा करने के लिए important था ESG होना. अभी if you are bad on the ESG score, people are not going to give you money. They like your company, they're still not going to be able to give you your money because sovereign funds at least across the world have this requirement कि भाई एक sovereign एक ESG score के नीचे आप पैसा डाल ही नहीं सकते. Are we clear with this? So these are funds which are run by the government. Okay, interest rate we'll do, business valuation we have discussed, and I think we are left with mergers and then interest rate. Mergers में तो खास कुछ है नहीं. नहीं, अभी मेरे पास वापस ये दिन देखने का कैपेसिटी नहीं है, राइट? सो विल हैव टू, आपका इतना एंथुसियाज्म जो मैंने आज देखा है, सो विल हैव टू फिनिश दिस टुडे. सो वी विल लुक एट मर्जर्स, स्मॉल थिंग. थोड़ा डिसअपॉइंटमेंट आप कर लो, उसके बाद अपन कंटिन्यू तो करना ही है. अरे फिर खत्म ही तो हो जाएगा, अभी ब्रीदर है, पूरा दिन ब्रीदर है, खत्म कर लेते, राइट? चलो, सॉरी. ओके, सो चलो लेट्स क्विकली फिनिश दिस. यू विल हैव व्हाट इज अ रिवर्स bid or a reverse merger. What is a reverse merger? A smaller company acquiring a bigger company, or loss making company acquiring a profitable company, a unlisted company acquiring a listed company. All of these are called as cases of reverse merger. Okay, so why would I do that? Various reasons. Maybe I want to carry forward losses, maybe I want to automatically get my company listed, whatever be the reasons. There can be various reasons why we can do a takeover, let us say by reverse bid. Second, write a note on carve out and difference from spin off. Carve out and spin off के बीच में का, they are asking you to find the difference. Now carve out is a situation where, read this, a partial spin off, in which case a company creates its own new subsidiary and subsequently brings out its IPO. It should however be noted that the parent company retains its control and only new shares are issued to the public. On the other hand, in spin-off, parent company does not receive any shares of the subsidiary. They are issued by existing shareholders in the form of dividend. What is the difference? Quite literally, okay, in case of a carve out, what will happen is, there may be a company, let us say Bharti Airtel. एयरटेल के पास बहुत सारे टेलीकॉम टावर्स है. Can I do a demerger? Yes. Bharti Airtel does a demerger. It forms a new company called as Bharti Infratel. So एक नया कंपनी बना, but if I do a demerger, shares have to be issued. Shares किसको issue होगे? Well, if Airtel has done the demerger, shares should be issued to Airtel only, and hence Infratel issues shares to Airtel. So Infratel becomes a subsidiary of Airtel, and then Infratel will raise money from the public through an IPO. इसको अपन बोलते हैं first case, carve out. Carve out में there will be a demerger, and after the demerger, I will issue shares to the selling company only. I am a subsidiary of the selling company. I am still a subsidiary of Airtel, जैसे Infratel में हुआ. I don't give shares to the shareholders. However, what Bajaj did, when Bajaj had its single company, it demerged into Bajaj Auto and Bajaj Finance. It says Bajaj Finance is now no longer a subsidiary of Bajaj Auto, but Bajaj Finance will give the shares to the shareholders of Bajaj Auto. आप समझ रहे हो? इसको बोला जाता है spin off. This you have to know from a theory as well as an MCQ perspective. Again, what is a carve out? In case of a carve out, a demerger will happen. So spin off, maybe demerger will happen, but in carve out, the demerger, new company will issue shares to whom? Selling company only. It will act as a subsidiary of the selling company. Whereas in case of a spin-off, a new company will issue shares to whom? Shareholders of the selling company. When you do your FR, for example, वहाँ पे आप business combination में पढ़ोगे ये सब, and वहाँ पे they will not use the word spin-off or carve out, but you should know what it means. In case of a carve out, you will be a subsidiary, whereas in spin-off you are now out of the loop. You are now going to be issuing shares directly to the shareholders. Yes. What are the various reasons for demerger? Well, you can have various reasons for demergers, including better management focus, better team. Maybe you want to sell it off. So pay attention to the core areas. May not be sufficiently contributing, too big to handle, etc. The difference between management buyout and leverage buyout. What are the purposes of leverage buyout? Well, buyouts क्या होते हैं? In case of a buyout, someone comes and acquires control over your company. In case of a management buyout, the management team acquires control. Whereas in leverage buyout, there is a fund which takes a massive amount of leverage or debt and uses that leverage or debt to take control over your company. Are we clear with this? So this is management buyout. If you see, buyouts initiated by the management team are known as management buyouts. Acquisition is bought by the own management team. Whereas next page pe leverage buyout, an acquisition of a company which is financed entirely or partially, more than 50% using borrowed funds, is called as a leveraged buyout. Are we clear with this? Next we have synergy. In the context of mergers, 2 plus 2 equals 5 is called as synergy. And in synergy, the value of the combined firm will be greater than the value of the individual firms. If they were operating separately, combined firm value will be greater than that. That is largely due to synergy. Synergy arises due to cost savings, revenue gains, etc. And that will, let us say, take care of synergy. This is the real reason, as per theory, for which merger should happen. Achha, these are interesting terms now. Defending company in a takeover bid. So if someone comes to acquire my company, practically क्या होता है, lot of shares are held by shareholders. Like Twitter for example, Elon Musk ने खरीद लिया, he bought it in a very hostile manner. The management team was not in favor of selling it to Elon Musk. However, Elon Musk के पास पैसा था and he approached the shareholders directly. He said तुम्हारा $100 का share, I'll give you $130. Shareholder ready हो गया बेचने को. So what over here is, if the company does not want the acquirer to acquire it, there are various, ये नाम काफी fancy है, okay? अगर आप नाम देखेंगे थोड़े एकदम fancy नाम है. You can either do a divestiture. Divestiture is what you demerge. There is some valuable asset, let us say oil wells. You want to acquire of a company. I divest the oil wells into a separate company and give it to the promoter. Divestiture. Crown jewels. ये भी same है. Like in my company, my crown jewel is the oil field. ये ऐसा हुआ था इराक वॉर, कुवैत वॉर के वक्त. When they thought that USA is coming over here, they thought that USA is coming because उसको oil चाहिए. बाकायदा they burned their oil wells. They said कि यार खत्म कर, मेरा नहीं तो शेख लोग का तो क्या भरोसा, मेरा नहीं तो तेरा भी नहीं. They actually burned their oil wells over there, right? So crown jewels. What is a crown jewel? You can probably take away the crown jewel. Poison pill. I will destroy my core assets. Poison put. White knight. White knight क्या होता है? ये सब बड़े बड़े, यानी white knight is someone comes to your defense, right? So if you like a particular person, you say इससे शादी करने के बदले इसके साथ कर लेते. It is quite literally that. No, it's quite literally that. So they say कि if I have to go, मेरे को अभी तो कोई option है ही नहीं, I will find someone who has my same wavelength and I will sell my company to that white knight. इसको white knight, and ऐसा हुआ है बड़े बड़े mergers में. Like लक्ष्मी मित्तल के बारे में सुना है अपन ने? मित्तल स्टील, currently one of the world's biggest steel companies. There was a company called as Arcelor. Mittal Steel was 7th in terms of size, owned by an Indian. Arcelor was French, 4th in size. So Mittal, Mr. Lakshmi Mittal put out a bid to acquire Arcelor. वो उनके बहुत जान पे आया. जैसे यार एक इंडियन कंपनी हमें acquire करेगा जो हम इतने पुराने हैं, he is smaller than us. So they bought in so many other companies like Severstall करके एक Russian company. They said बेचेंगे तो यूरोप में बेचेंगे. Why should an Asia, like Arcelor was treated as a crown of France and it was one of the biggest steel companies. So वो एक Indian own कर देगा. So that ways they tried to bring in Severstall and all of these companies Russia से वगैरह से कि भाई तुम ले लो मेरे कंपनी को. If it has to go, it should go not outside Europe, for example, but somehow Lakshmi Mittal managed to find his way out. But this is white knight strategy where I try to get a white knight in my defense and sell it off to that white knight rather than going to the person who I don't want to go, right? Okay, so over here, आप तो लापता लेडीज मूवी देखे, right? उसमें ऐसा exactly नहीं है, but ऐसा ही कुछ हो जाता है, right? So you have golden parachutes. What do you mean by golden parachute? You will make takeover very difficult. You will say कि if you take over, then management team को आपको इतना बड़ा golden parachute देना पड़ेगा. Like Elon Musk actually paid Parag Agarwal close to $500 million because he was acquiring this company. So there was a clause in Twitter that if someone was to acquire, तो management team को आपको इतना भरना पड़ेगा. That will dissuade me कि यार छोड़ना यार, इतना कौन पे करेगा. But that is a dissuading mechanism. Golden parachutes. Then is Pac-Man defense. I don't know. आपने Pac-Man game खेला? So in Pac-Man आपको कभी कभार power मिल जाता है. Usually आप भागते हैं. You are usually running away, but then sometimes you get that power तो आप ही उल्टा खाने चले जाते हो. So Pac-Man defense is if you are going to चल मैं तेरे को acquire करेगा. So you go back and you put an offer for the acquirer. That is Pac-Man defense. So you back them away saying that if you come to acquire me, I will acquire you. I will put a bid to your shareholders to acquire you. That is Pac-Man defense. Rather than you eating me, I will eat you. And then you have green mail. So it's like a way through the mail where you communicate and you kind of tell your shareholders that this is not a good target, etc. Good, you should not vote in favor. So ये सब अलग अलग वर्ड्स है. कल उठ के अगर MCQ में आ जाता, you should know. थियरी में आएगा तो 4-5 चीज आ जाना चाहिए. क्राउन, ज्वेल्स, poison pill that is destroying your own assets, divestiture, demerging it and transfer it somewhere, white knight, golden parachutes, Pac-Man defense, etc. Financial restructuring, yeah, this is nothing but internal reconstruction. In your CA inter, you studied internal reconstruction, you come up with a scheme with your lenders, with court, with shareholders, where you restructure, try to write off the losses. And you do the restructuring so that you clean up your balance sheet, remove the losses, etc. from your balance sheet. Merger failures or potential adverse competitive effects, most of the times, okay, most of the times merger fails. Because, अच्छा अभी बाइजूस आज इतने खराब हालत में, almost everyone says that is because they aggressively paid for acquiring. So merger में when you are acquiring, you aggressively keep on paying, so you end up overpaying. उसके बाद two companies join, लोगों का एक्सेल शीट के आगे people have to merge, right? And for that लोगों का working style अलग अलग हो सकता है. So for the teams to blend might be a little difficult. So mergers fail because acquirers overpay, value is generally overestimated, there is a psychological barrier, post merger integration is relatively poor, etc. Okay, then you have another question, unrelated companies come together to form an entity. What is this called? You remember what is this called? Horizontal is two competitors, vertical is within the supply chain. If two unrelated companies come together and conglomerate, it is called as conglomerate merger. Two unrelated companies coming together, maybe to diversify, maybe to reduce risk. Okay, so this is called as conglomerate merger. In a pure conglomerate, no important common factors are there. Some degree of overlapping may be there. Purpose is utilizing financial resources, enhance debt capacity and synergy of managerial functions. Cross-border M&A is a popular route for global growth. Do you agree or disagree? Well, generally yes. Cross-border M&A, Tata has grown by doing so many cross-border M&As. Jaguar hai, Chorus hai, Tetley hai, all of these are acquired overseas. That is a way of growing. Globalization, integration of global economies, expansion of trade, tax incentives are there. So there are various reasons why cross-border M&A will help you grow faster. Demerger or division of family managed business. It's like every other demerger, just that because it is family managed, there might be an additional complexity in terms of the family agreement, etc., on which the demerger can happen. So family types of mergers, we have horizontal, vertical, conglomerate, co-generic. Co-generic would be related to basic technology process. Otherwise, vertical, horizontal we have discussed. And reverse merger, bigger company gets acquired by a smaller company, for example. Buyouts, again we have discussed this. Buyouts can be management buyouts where the management team is buying out the company, or a leverage buyout where huge debt is taken to buy out a company. Explain different forms of divestitures. This I would definitely treat as important. We have discussed two of the types. There are a few other types as well. देखो सबसे पहले different ways of divestment or demerger or divestitures. A sell off or a partial sell off. यहाँ पे क्या है? I'm not demerge, I'm directly selling it off to someone. So as the name goes, I have a division, I directly sell it off to someone. ऐसा नहीं कि ये मेरा subsidiary मेरे shareholder के पास गया. No, I'm selling it off. So over here, a sell off, like slum sale, you remember? Slum sale is a classic sell off. I'm not demerging or doing anything, I'm selling it off. Spin off, split up, and equity carve out. So we have not studied about split up per se, but we discussed about spin off. Acha, spin off mein you guys tell me, shares are issued to whom? Shareholders. The existing shareholders of the firm get proportionate ownership. देखा spin off में लिखा हुआ existing shareholders get proportionate ownership. Split up अपन देखते. Equity carve out में क्या होता है? It is like spin off. However, some shares of the new company are sold in the market by making a public offer. I said Bharti Infratel came up, made a new company and issued shares even to the public at large. That is a carve out. But in case of a split up, this is new. अच्छा यहाँ पे नया कौन सा है? Sell off, जो obviously is like slum sale, and then there is split up. This involves breaking up the entire firm into a series of spin-offs. By creating separate legal entities, the parent firm no longer legally exists and only newly created entities survive. Earlier क्या होता था? In carve out, बराबर से सुनेंगे, in carve out, I will demerge Bharti Airtel brings out Bharti Infratel, and Bharti Infratel acts as a subsidiary of Airtel, and later Infratel raises money from the public as well. In a spin-off, there is Bajaj, and Bajaj makes a new company. It continues as it is, it makes a new company, Bajaj Finance. But in a split up, what happens is Bajaj Holdings itself closes. It will form it. Demerger में क्या होता है? The original company तो continue करता है ना यार. New company is formed, but the original company continues, no? In case of a split up, the entire company breaks, and three new companies are formed. तो पहले मेरा एक ही कंपनी था, बजाज होल्डिंग्स. इन बजाज होल्डिंग्स आई हैड बजाज ऑटो एज वेल एज द फाइनेंस डिविजन. इन केस ऑफ अ carve out, Bajaj Holdings will still continue, Bajaj Finance will come out, and it will become a subsidiary of Bajaj Holdings. In a spin-off, Bajaj Holdings will still continue, Bajaj Finance will come out, and it will give shares to the shareholders of Bajaj Holdings. So Bajaj Holdings भी continue कर रहा है, and Bajaj Finance भी continue कर रहा है. However, in a split up, like if there is Mahindra, एक ही कंपनी था Mahindra and Mahindra Limited. It broke. There is no longer anything called as Mahindra and Mahindra. There became Mahindra Auto. Then that became Club Mahindra. Then that became Tech Mahindra, Mahindra Finance. Mahindra and Mahindra बचा ही नहीं. आज के तारीख में है M&M. But I'm saying that if they did a split up route, Mahindra and Mahindra would not still remain. Are we clear with this? The entire company will close. It's like in CA Inter, if you remember, amalgamation में क्या होता है? दोनों कंपनीज बंद होकर एक नया कंपनी बनता है. Absorption में one company closes, the other company still there, it just merges with the other. In a similar way, ये सुनने को सेम ही लगेगा, एंड ये MCQ में आप फंसोगे ही फंसोगे. When you look at split up, it is like in HUF सुना है अपन ने? HUF में full partition सुना है? नहीं? Okay, HUF we have not done as much. ठीक है. So in HUF, if there is a full partition, there are brothers, everyone separates. There is no longer a Hindu undivided family. That is like a split up. Everyone is separating. If one of the brothers separates, the other HUF continues as it is. उसमें कोई टेंशन नहीं है. One brother separates. That can be a spin-off or it can be a carve-out, depending on at least company structure में क्या. But if the entire HUF is dissolved, तो वो बन जाता है split up. Yes, okay. ये आप डेफिनेटली रिव्यू करोगे. दिस विल कम सम और द अदर वे. इधर एमसीक्यू थियरी किधर तो आ सकता है. एक्सप्लेन द सेल साइड इंपेरेटिव्स इन मर्जर एंड एक्विजिशन. Why do you sell side means I want to sell now. Why do I want to sell? Well, because competitors pressure is increasing. There is too much competition happening. Sales of company seems to be inevitable because I don't have new technology. There's strong entry barriers, badly positioned. Critical mass is very difficult. There is a window of opportunity at an attractive price. I want to focus on my core competencies. This is happening in the best interest of shareholders. So basically, they're just saying that why will a company want to sell? There can be various such reasons why a company might be looking for selling. Maybe a good opportunity. I don't have new technology. There are huge barriers to entry. There's huge competitive pressure. जैसे telecom में हो रहा था after Jio came in. Are we clear with this? Startup finance we have already done. You will go at the end for mergers and acquisitions. Third last page or something. Second or third last page. नहीं. कुछ है क्या? है ही नहीं mergers पीछे. 270. हाँ. Unlocking the value through mergers and acquisitions and corporate restructuring. So there is a theory, unlocking value. Value can be unlocked how? Well, you can have horizontal merger and the value of reduced competition will come. Vertical merger and you can save cost, etc. Merging a subsidiary with the holding company with a view to improve cash flow. An amalgamation may also be resorted for nourishing back a sick unit. Business restructuring, positioning of the company, surviving an adverse economy. So maybe this is just a general theory note. इसका कोई question भी नहीं. ये सिर्फ theory है जो हमारे main इसके अंदर cover नहीं हो रहा है. There are a few other theories also in mergers and acquisition. If you see the स्टडी मटेरियल, दे हैव गिवन यू 3 फेल्ड केसेस, एक्चुअल केसेस. अभी उसके ऊपर तो सम शायद नहीं आएगा कि वोडाफोन का क्या हुआ, रैनबैक्सी सन का क्या हुआ. दे हैव गिवन यू 3-4 एक्चुअल केसेस. इफ यू हैव टाइम यू कैन गो थ्रू देम, बट अदरवाइज एग्जाम के लिए तो इट्स डेफिनेटली नॉट गोइंग टू कम. Like derivatives में also they have said few practical cases where companies lost a lot of money due to derivatives. So for your reading pleasure, you can refer that, which I am pretty sure you have better things, right? Okay, and the last chapter over here is interest rate. Interest rate कर ही देते तो theory is kind of समझ में आएगा ना आपको. कोई मैं देखता हूँ ना शर्म ही नहीं आता. So okay, so there is interest rate. There are a few questions. 5-10 मिनट का हिसाब है. सर करेंगे उतने टाइम में 5-10 मिनट हो जाएगा. लंबा किधर हुआ है? We still have some time. नहीं वो होने वाला था, नहीं हो पाया, right? So there is this theory. उसको क्या बोलते हैं? Your work expands to the time you have. आपके पास इतना टाइम है, आप उतना लेक्चर ले लोगे, राइट? सो नहीं नहीं, सो होल्ड ऑन. सो वील डू दिस वन चैप्टर एंड वी गेट डन विद दिस. सो आई लेट्स फिनिश. लास्ट चैप्टर है यार, चलो. नहीं बाद में नहीं. So you have something in interest rate, there's something called as the cheapest to deliver in case of interest rate futures. In case of futures, if there is going to be a gross settlement, in futures if there is going to be a gross settlement, you will say that which bond will I deliver. Now let's say I have a future on a notional government of India bond. Now government of India के काफी सारे bonds होते हैं. So which bond should I deliver? Well, generally whichever bond results in me having the cheapest cost to buy that bond and deliver it, I will use that. For that there are various conversion factors which are there. Well, we will say a multiplier. So this bond is, let's say, 0.95 times my main bond, or this bond is, let's say, 1.05 times. It is like saying that अगर मेरा gold है and I want to deliver gold, ideally 24 कैरेट गोल्ड है तो 24 कैरेट ही डिलीवर करना पड़ेगा. बट इफ आई डोंट हैव 24 कैरेट, उसके बदले आई हैव अ 22 कैरेट गोल्ड, then there will be a conversion factor. They will say कि भाई ठीक है, 124 carat gold is equal to 1.1 22 carat gold. So if I have to give and deliver, instead of delivering 1 gram of 24 carat, I can deliver, I am allowed to deliver 1.1 grams of 22 carat. अभी मैं कैलकुलेट करूंगा. I will say 1 gram, let us say, मेरे पास दोनों ऑप्शंस है. आई विल से 1 ग्राम ऑफ 24 कैरेट इज हाउ मच सर? 8,000 रुपीज. अच्छा, 1 ग्राम ऑफ 22 कैरेट इज हाउ मच? वेल सर 7,000 रुपीज. अच्छा, इफ आई डू 7,000 इंटू 1.1, मेरे को 1 ग्राम नहीं 1.1 ग्राम डिलीवर करना पड़ेगा. बट इफ आई डू 7,000 इंटू 1.1, इट इज एट 7,700. सो व्हाट इज चीपेस्ट टू डिलीवर? डू आई डिलीवर 1 ग्राम 24 कैरेट गोल्ड और डू आई डिलीवर 1.1 ग्राम 22 कैरेट गोल्ड? 1.1 gram. That is called as cheapest to deliver contracts. If I have given, and every contract does not have this choice, if I have given a choice of a few bonds, okay, by to settle these bonds I can deliver any of them, then I will find what is the cheapest to deliver bond and deliver that bond only. Are we clear with this? So over here, CTD is a bond that minimizes the differences between the quoted spot price and the future settlement price. So this is the bond which is cheapest to deliver. Discuss the type of commodity swaps. There can be fixed to floating swaps, commodity for interest swaps. Fixed to floating is very normal. It's like an interest rate swap where one company has borrowed fixed, another company has borrowed floating. I no longer want fixed, I want floating. They don't no longer want floating, they want fixed. We enter into a swap. Then it's a commodity for interest. It's like a barter. I will pay interest, you give me a commodity. Ideally, I am buying a commodity, I will pay interest, you give me a commodity. So, it is commodity for interest swaps. There are three terms: caps, floors and collars. Caps mean it is an option to borrow at maximum a particular interest rate. So, let us say I have taken a floating rate loan. अभी floating rate loan में तो rate कुछ भी हो जा सकता है. But if I buy a cap, cap as the name goes is maximum. मैक्सिमम 12% के ऊपर नहीं जाएगा, दैट इज अ कैप. इफ आई हैव लेंट मनी, I will look at a floating rate. The rate can keep on falling, but I will say in no case will it go below 4%. That is the floor. Cap is maximum limit on your interest rate. Floor is the minimum interest rate. Whereas collar is a strategy like a straddle strangle hota na. It's a combination of cap and floor. I will buy the cap, sell the floor, or sell the cap, buy the floor. It's a collar strategy. We will do sums on this. You will get absolute clarity. ये तीन तो आपको एकदम आराम से आ जाएगा, cap, floor and collar. What is swaptions? Swaptions, again it's a pure theory. It is an option to enter into a swap. Swaption समझा, swap plus options. So currently हमने option क्या लिया? Option to buy a share, option to buy a bond. Swaption is an option that you have to enter into a swap at a later date if you want to. अभी you have borrowed floating rate. आपको डर है कि rate of interest अगर बढ़ गया तो, बट कम हो गया तो आपको फायदा होगा. सो आई डोंट वांट टू नेसेसरली एंटर इनटू अ स्वैप, बट आई वांट एन ऑप्शन टू एंटर इनटू अ स्वैप इफ द रेट्स गो अगेंस्ट मी. सो आई विल टेक अ स्वैप्शन. स्वैप में तो नेसेसरली आई विल स्वैप फ्लोटिंग रेट फॉर फिक्स रेट. इन अ स्वैप्शन आई हैव एन ऑप्शन टू स्वैप. सो ओवर हियर कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ टू डेरिवेटिव्स, दैट इज ऑप्शन एज वेल एज स्वैप. ओके, देन यू हैव सिग्निफिकेंस ऑफ लाइबोर. ये तो अभी ओल्ड है, ये अभी आपको पढ़ना भी नहीं है. लाइबोर नाउ लंडन इंटरबैंक ऑफर रेट, नो वन इज फर्दर यूजिंग, बट इट वाज अर्लियर यूज्ड फॉर प्राइसिंग अ लॉट ऑफ इंटरनेशनल ट्रांजैक्शंस. Define interest rate swaptions. We discussed this earlier in the principal features. A swaption is simply an option on an interest rate swap. If I want to enter into an interest rate swap, it gives me an option to enter into an interest rate swap. Principal features, it's an option on a forward interest rate swap. So you can just refer this theory. It's a little technical, but just remember a swaption is an option to enter into a swap. Write a short note on forward rate agreements. What are the main features of a forward rate agreement? Well, have you done currency forwards? It's a forward to buy currency. In a similar way, equity forwards, यहाँ पे it's a forward that I'm entering to borrow or lend at a predefined rate at a predefined date. I need money 6 months later for a period of 3 months. I don't need money now. But I am worried that 6 months के बाद price बढ़ जाएगा, so I go to the bank and enter into a forward contract to borrow after 6 months, let us say for a period of 3 months at a particular rate. So over here, this is used by banks to fix their interest rate cost. It's an off-balance sheet financing instrument. It does not involve transfer of principal. So we will do sums on forward rate agreement as well. You will have a lot of sums pertaining to forward rate agreements. And what is the net interest position risk and price risk? See, when you look at bonds, price of a bond is inversely related to interest rate. So as interest rate increases, bond price falls. But at the same time, if interest rate increases, your reinvestment amount increases. Whatever you get from the bond, you can reinvest it at a higher rate. So the interest rate risk is a possibility that the interest rate risk increases. So the bond price will fall. So price risk नीचे गिरेगा. But your reinvestment will be higher. You can reinvest at a higher price. Explain asset liability management. Usually ALM is used for banks or pension funds. Like banks में क्या होता है, they borrow at an interest rate and they lend also at an interest rate. They have assets which have interest rate income, liabilities which have interest rate cost. Even a pension fund, it has to pay pension gratuity, liability, but it will make investments in bonds. So here I am trying to balance my assets and liabilities. In portfolio, remember there was not portfolio, in valuation there was a concept of immunization where you try to, अब हाँ क्या बोलते कुछ याद है अपने को? What is immunization? Is a situation where the duration of asset equals the duration of liabilities. That is called as immunization position. That is to manage my interest rate and price risk. Okay. Explain various methods for hedging of interest rate risk. Forward, futures, options, swaps, standard methods that you have for hedging interest rate. Interest rate क्यों? This can also be methods to hedge currency risk, methods to hedge equity risk. You can use futures, options, forwards, swaps or swaptions as the case may be. And then there is a conversion factor in interest rate futures that is very similar to what we had discussed in cheapest to deliver. अपन ने वो जो example किया था ना यार, 24 karat gold and 22 karat gold, 1.1 was a conversion factor. So 1.1 grams of 22 karat gold is 1 gram of 24 karat gold. That is a conversion factor. So over here, that is regarding interest rate. We'll just see at the end कुछ है क्या इसका? Is there something? नहीं है ना? चलो बधाई हो. So congratulations for sitting through and thank you very much for your patience genuinely. So we are done with the theory section and just review this part between the two theory videos. First part is more important, second part is also important. To the extent that आप उसको देख लो एक बार, not necessarily something which is very exam, very focused. Read it like you are reading a newspaper. जब भी आपके पास टाइम है फटाफट एक बार घुमा लेने का and you should be done. ठीक है?